Good afternoon, or sorry, good morning. It's still morning. It's been a long day already. Good morning. I'd like to call to order the Corporate and Administrative Services Committee meeting at 9:31 on May 28th, and acknowledge that the Sunshine Coast Regional District is within the traditional territories of the Shuswap Nation and the Squamish Nation. This morning we had an amended agenda put out to us. Does everybody have a copy of the amended agenda? All right. So I'd like to look for a motion to adopt the amended agenda as presented. Moved? Seconded? All in favor? Thank you. And then before we actually get into the package, I'd look for a motion to adopt all the reports and communications. Receive all the communications. Moved, seconded, all in favor? Thank you. All right, so we're going to move into item number 1, Annex A, sorry, item number 2, Annex A, pages 1 through 9. This is the budget project status report. And as usual, we'll go by page on this. Sorry, I'm going to get mine up in front of me here. So let's start with page 1. And let me get the participant list here so I can see hands. All right. Anybody have any questions about page 1? That is items numbers 1 through 24. Seeing none there, I'm going to ask about number 11. This is just some clarification. This is talking about the Mason Road utility building space planning. So it's talking about planning, but then in the description, in the current status, it talks about the building permit has been obtained and we're receiving quotes to complete the building modifications. So we're talking about planning, but now we're talking about modifications. So just some clarity around what's actually happening up in that facility.
Thank you for the question. Actually, maybe the title planning was a little bit too narrow scope to the description in the budget. Proposal itself was broader. It was planning and the reconfiguration of our utility building to create more workstations and to move the lunchroom to another location within the same building. And we did all the work, all the design in-house. And that's why we were able to move forward to getting already a building permit.
Perfect. Thank you. Any other questions on page 1? So let's move on to page 2, numbers 25 through 44. And before we get into that, I'm going to look at 24 and 25. This is around education and outreach materials and an app for the curbside collection services. And I have just a question for staff. I know Gibson's is already doing some of this. Seashell is moving into that. Is there any collaboration happening between the municipalities around any of this work?
Thank you for the question. And yes, there is 100%. We're intending to use the same app and to harmonize materials or supporting curbside collection between the 3 munis.
Awesome. All right. Any other questions on page 2? Director Hiltz.
Just wanted to say something about the educational developments that they'd had come before PMAC, and the PMAC had comment on it as well, just as a point of information.
Thank you. Any other questions on page 2? Oh, staff's doing an amazing job on all this. It's great. So the third page, items 45 through 65. Any questions on any of those? Okay, seeing none. Next page. This is items 66 through 85. Director Ties.
Yeah, sorry, I was a bit late on the draw.
That's okay.
On the item on page 3, it's the website redesign phase 2, just looking for a timeline.
All right, and staff.
Oh, February 21, right, never mind.
Okay, you got it? Okay. Okay. Director Lee.
Item 63, it talks about a confined space review, and it's got just area A as the participant. Is that correct?
I think if you look further through the document, you'll actually find it's actually listed for others as well. They're just not all together, but I'll turn that over to staff to confirm.
Thank you for the question. Yes, indeed. Number 65 is the confined space document as well. And I agree that there's an error in the function participating, because some are for regional and some are for area A. We can clarify that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions on this page? That's up to, so let's go all the way up to end of 85. Any questions on any of those? All right, so if we go on to 86 through 110. Director McMahon and then Director Lee.
Yeah, I was wondering about 106, the Chapman Lake Siphon System upgrade, if we could just hear what's happening with that.
Remco, I think that's yours.
I think it is. Thank you for the question. The siphon is currently still covered under some snow, so we haven't been able to clearly identify how it survived the winter. We'll have to go up there in upcoming weeks to confirm that, and then we can see if any further work is required. Last year, we intended to do some upgrades to it, but the water level stayed too high to actually do the work. So that's why it's still on the list to do this year.
Okay, Director Lee.
Yes, I was looking at line 111, and it's talking about zoning bylaw 310, which area A doesn't participate in. Should it say 310 and 337, or what is that initiative?
That's Mr. Hall.
Thank you for the question. That project is focused on bylaw 310, and that project was initiated, I think, in 2017 budget. I think the majority of the work was done in 2018. And staff are looking at the opportunities that come from that review to flow improvements to 337 as well. But at this time, the scope of the work is focused on 310. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay. Any other questions up through number 110? All right, we got 111 through 129. Director McMahon, and then Director Ties.
Yeah, on item 127, which is the planning for a connector trail, actually, I believe that's supposed to be upgrades to existing connector trails to make them more useful. We did, actually, it may have started that way, but I think that's where we ended up. Perhaps GM Hall could comment on that.
Thank you, Director, and yes, you're correct. The direction from the board at the time the budget proposal was approved was to focus on enhancing existing assets rather than creating new ones where possible. Thanks.
Okay, Director Ties, and then I don't know who put their hand up first, Toth or Lee, so you guys will have to flip for it.
Thank you, Chair. Mine's on number 119. The asset management, taking the lead on the community recreation facilities, future planning and end of useful life assessment. I'm just wondering what the timeline is on that. I think it's a crucial project, and it's and I'm also seeing, you know, things like heat exchangers being replaced in the Gibsons and aquatic facilities, and I'm wondering if we'll get a return on investment on that, depending on where these studies go. So, yeah, just wondering if we could maybe get a bit of a time frame on asset management, getting a handle on that.
On staff?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So most certainly staff intend on proceeding with that particular project. We actually are looking to scope some of that in June. And so that particular project, may or may not recall, is focuses on the two older recreation facilities, the Sunshine Coast Arena as well as the Gibson's pool. But we will try to scope all four particular facilities there to generate some end useful life, as well as meet some of the asset retirement obligation for the public accounting sector standards. So having that said, some of the projects that are contemplated in this year's plan, I think, are quite critical to the continued delivery of those particular services. So I think they're quite important. They're quite critical to make sure that those facilities operate. So we're continuing to proceed with them, but being mindful of what the end of life is. So I don't know if GM Hall has anything to add there.
No, thank you. Couldn't have said it better myself. Thanks.
All right, so Director Toth or Director Lee, who's going first?
Director Toth had his hand up first.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you, Director Lee. Looking at number 123, Goodwin House removal. It says here that there's, you know, the GM needs to review before proceeding further. Has there been no interest in the house as a house, or is it just to be demolished, or where do we move forward on this particular project?
Thank you for the question, Director. On that one, we remain in negotiations with proponents that responded to the request for proposals or request for quotations, and remain committed to looking at options that would either see reuse of the building or at least reduce the amount of material that flows to the landfill through deconstruction or reuse.
And Director Toth, did you have a follow-up with that?
No, it's a new question, so I'll...
Okay. Director Lee, and then back to Director Toth.
This is, I probably know the answer, but I'm going to ask it anyways. It's line 222 to 128. And I notice it's bridge repair. And we actually had Catherine Lake Bridge took out because it was blocking the fish going up the creek. Would Catherine Lake Bridge be put back in under this project, or do we need a different project? Or
And staff?
Thank you for the question. This project, I believe, started with a total budget of something in the order of $20,000 or $25,000, and it was focused on upgrades or repairs that were specified in a comprehensive review of all of SCRD's parks bridges. And the balance that's shown was what we opened the year with, representing just a final couple of projects. And it's nearly fully expended to date. I think there's one more bridge in Cliff Gilker to be done under this project. And so to answer the director's question, the Catherine Lake Bridge was not part of this project and isn't planned to be part of the remaining steps of the project.
Director Lee, does that answer your question?
that's why I said I thought I knew the answer to it.
Okay.
So my second one is, are we planning on fixing the Catherine Lake Bridge?
GM Hall?
I did not anticipate that question, Chair. So don't have that specific question, but I will say that as part of our asset management work and our park management planning work, reviewing the needs in a given park, as well as the interface with any environmental regulations, such as effects on streams, which was the issue with that particular bridge. Those questions would be looked at, and so through those mechanisms, the future of any existing bridges or any future bridges would be contemplated.
Okay, I'm going to throw one question here before we go back to Director Toth. Number 114 is around hillside development and investment attraction analysis. I know that in conversation with Scredo, this is also on their radar. I don't know if they've done anything around this, but I'm just wondering if staff at the regional district are looking at working with Scredo on moving something like this forward.
Thank you for the question, Chair. Indeed, staff are, and I have spoken with Mr. Stansfield about this project, coming at it from several different angles, and I'm confident we will find a way to collaborate with them to make the most of the opportunity.
All right, thank you. I mean, I know that at the SCRD, I mean, it's off the side of your desk, and given that they're working on economic development, that's their focus. Hopefully there can be some synergies and, you know, maximize everybody's time.
Absolutely.
All right, Director Toth and then Director Hiltz.
Item 124, signage upgrade. Are there any plans to also include pronunciation guides or anything like that on our SCRD website? Because I think it's a fantastic initiative, but a lot of people are going to have a lot of trouble with some of the names that are on the signs. And I know that I think it would be a great cultural initiative to partner with the Seashell Nation to get like their elders to help us with pronunciation guides. So just a question, thought.
Staff?
Excellent thought, and staff have heard the same comment from the community. That work is not within the scope of the project, and resourcing it would require work both on our part and on the part of the Seashell Nation or members of the Elders Language Group. Something that could be considered for a future work plan. It's not in the work plan or resourced from our end right now.
Okay, Director Hiltz and then Director Kroll. Oh, Mr. Parker. Let's go there first.
Thank you. I just wanted to add to GM Hall's comments there. We also have an initiative that is pending within the Human Resources Department with First Nations cultural appreciation. So I've made a note of the comments, and we can look to incorporate some of those considerations as we move forward with that planning. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Director Hiltz.
Thanks. Yeah, just looking for a little background on the Catherine Lake Bridge. Vehicle, pedestrian, crosses a river or something. I don't really know anything about it.
Who wants to take that one?
Well, I can take a stab at it, and GM Hall can correct me if I get it wrong.
Okay.
There's a retired federal biologist that lives close to it there, and his passion is the salmon in the creeks. And so he noticed that the bridge was blocking the salmon from coming up, and he phoned me and a whole bunch of other people, and we did get a backhoe there in an emergency situation and lift the bridge out, and lo and behold, the fish got through. But of course, there's nothing, and it was really appreciated. It was SCRD did a great job there fixing it and rescuing the fish. But now the hikers are using that path, and I suspect they're wading through the creek because I know they're getting there. So hopefully they aren't causing more damage, but I think we should try and get the bridge back in just to make sure we don't cause unintended environmental damage from people continuing to use that path.
Okay, Director Hiltz, anything further?
Yeah, so just clear, it is a SCRD asset on an SCRD trail in an SCRD park?
Yes.
Okay, Director Kroll.
Thank you, Director Sagers. Just going back to Director Toth's comments, there is a provincial website that does, it's got a map. You can click on the Indigenous name for a space, and it actually gives the pronunciation. They have both male and female people giving the proper pronunciation. I'll see if I can find it. I believe it appeared in one of the reports we had a while ago, when this whole business with the renaming came up, and there was a link in the report to this provincial site, but it's really quite good.
I'm wondering, though, if that would only take in those places that are registered with the province, not necessarily take in our parks.
I
mean, that'd be something to follow up on. Yeah.
I think as it evolves, like the Selma Park proposed name was on the site, or Madeira.
I mean, right, but those are initiated by the province.
Yeah.
Right, versus what's initiating here.
Yeah, I suspect they will be updating the site.
Okay, Director Toth and then Director Lee.
Yeah, I think it would be great to see this as an initiative moving forward. And if it's got to wait till 2021 so we can put some resources behind it, then so be it. But I hope staff take note of that. And if they would like to move forward on it, they come forward. Otherwise, I'm happy to make a motion that we add more stuff to their plate for 2021.
Staff, how would you like to see us deal with this?
I can.
Mr. Parker? Yep.
Thank you, Chair. Actually, within this report, I believe it's on line 79. There is a reference made there to the First Nations cultural appreciation. So I'll certainly be looking to move forward with planning as time goes on here. But we do have some funding, and certainly if we need some more, we can look to come back for next year. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Lee.
I probably didn't explain the bridge part quite right. I probably left people wondering how a bridge could block fish. What was happening was the bridge was basically right down at the surface of the stream, and the beavers would build a dam behind it very quickly. They'd do it just automatic, almost overnight. So we had to take the bridge out to actually stop the beavers from building the dam. So it's not just simply flopping her back down and all's good. It's got to be redesigned. So it's not as simple. Maybe Ian can add some more for me.
Thank you, Chair. The director captures the situation very well. I would just add that in the time that we've been speaking, in checking files, this bridge actually was replaced last week, so it's in place and open and constructed such that the issue shouldn't persist.
Oh, you're fast. Thank you.
All right, so that was pages or numbers 111 to 129. Any others on that page? So let's move to the next page, 130. Let's do down to where it says completed. So 130 and on to 137 and then 1 through 6. All right, while you're looking at that, I'm going to comment on number 133. So 133 is talking about field road space planning. And the conversation that's probably happening at the regional district is similar to what's happening right now in the district of Seashot. District of Seashot, we're looking at opening June 1st. We know that prior to the pandemic, we were having space issues. Right now, we have no idea. We don't know what it's going to look like for the foreseeable future. We don't know how quickly we're going to have staff back in. We don't know if we're ever going to have all staff back in. We don't know what that looks like. So the conversation for us has basically been pushed out a ways. So I'm assuming that the regional district is in the same place now, but not sure. So that's probably, I don't know who would take that, CAO or one of the GMs?
I can start a little bit, and thank you for the question, Chair. In general, yeah, I think we're in a very similar position to where Sea Shelton, to a degree, Gibsons find themselves, looking at some form of opening the week of June 1st, ensuring that we're able to meet all the requirements for people to pay their bills for the AAP process, but still figuring out what services are going to look like, operational hours, how many people are in the building. Certainly as we start, it's going to be a phased approach. And one of the things that are obvious is, you know, some of the ideas that we were looking at in a space challenged environment with full operations as we used to previously do them before all of this, included things like doubling up on office spaces and looking at building new cubicles that were slightly smaller to accommodate more people. I mean, certainly none of that is going to happen anytime soon. If it ever happens, we don't know what's going to happen. Like Sea Shelton, we don't know how long this is going to last or what the new workplace will look like, but it's certainly going to include things like certain people coming in on certain days and not others, different types of operational hours. We have learned a tremendous amount about the ability to work from home that we probably wouldn't have learned had none of this happened. There's a lot of work that can be productively done from home, some of which includes service aspects to it. So I think there's going to be a lot of flexibility moving forward in terms of how we address space issues. And we don't know what the final solution is, but it's certainly not going to be the same level of problem that it was before. And if anyone else wants to chime in on that, please feel free.
It looks like you've covered it off. Director McMahon.
Yeah, just kind of following up on that, I was going to ask our HR how it's been managing this work from home thing, because, you know, not all home situations are created equal. I have an office with a door and it works real well for me. And I don't have, you know, dogs and cats and children and so forth running around this place. But some people are very challenged to work from home, and that's got nothing to do with the job they're doing. It's their personal circumstances. So planning for this sort of thing must be sort of challenging. Any observations on that?
Go ahead, Mr. Parker.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Director, for the question. It has been challenging, definitely, and for some people, as you've outlined, far more challenging. I've also found it a bit challenging at times, and so we've been having some very good dialogues. I know managers have been keeping in touch with pretty much all of their staff at different times. We've been having Zoom meetings. We have, and I really want to comment on our IT department and the work that they've done to enable and support all of the connections. Chat room popped up, things along that line. We've also heard from some staff who have childcare issues, and we've been working closely with the union to address accommodation issues. So, however, we've also had some great successes, and some tremendous work has been done remotely. So I think, as we've heard, we've learned a lot, as our CAO McKinley just said. We've learned a lot about how to navigate in this new normal. And a lot of it is working quite well. And in some cases, productivity has been astounding. It's been amazing. So we'll see how this goes going forward. But as CEO McKinley mentioned, we're moving forward with our restarting of services in a very cautious manner. And we're hoping to do this the right way. We'll make sure we do it the right way moving forward. But it is challenging. Thank you.
Sorry, I muted myself. Director Kroll, you're all waiting for me. I'm waiting for you. Director Kroll, over to you.
Thank you, Director Seegers. In the town of Gibsons, we were sort of fortunate because we were right at a pivotal point in upgrading our computers, our computers. So the upgrade was done to enable people to work from home, which previously they couldn't do. So all the new computer gear came in. It was set up in a manner that allowed people to work from home and maintain the security protocols that needed to be accommodated. During the sort of lockdown period, we reinstituted one of the doors to the town hall that had been decommissioned. So a flower bed was removed, a new sidewalk was put back in. So we now have sort of town hall entrance and sort of ICBC entrance, and they're sort of separate. It's quite amazing. The town has been sort of reopened. We sort of reopened around the time that water bills came due for payment on a sort of limited scale, and it's worked really well. It's we're still working on the 3-shift people, 1 shift working, 1 shift sort of separated for them, and 1 shift backups, and probably that will be kept in place for a while. But I'm sure the CAOs are talking about this in their morning meetings if they're still happening, which I assume they are. But it's been working really well, and the pressure of this small little building that was sort of bulging at the seams has been taken off. Office expansion has been deferred sort of indefinitely for the moment.
Director Toth?
Thank you. Item 132, one-time minor capital upgrades and renewal. Reading the current status box, I assume that this is for Dakota Ridge, but can somebody sort of confirm and skim through it? Talks about renovation of existing kiosk and signage and new entrance to the warming hut. So,
And staff?
Yes, that is, Chair, that is the Dakota Ridge Service 680. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I have a question about number 135. So this is a carry forward from 2018. This is with regards to software for the fire departments. I remember us talking about this when we had the consultants come in. I don't remember exactly what the software is for. I know that there was an issue that the fire department staff couldn't get access to it internally in our system. My question, though, is if we're looking at this, they're not looking to have a meeting actually till Q4 of this year. And I'm wondering what the issue is that the delay is till Q4 to actually getting this moving forward, given the project's been around since 2018. And whose department is that one?
I guess I'll
You'll
answer.
take that? Okay, Mr. Fargo, okay.
I'll answer just by saying that I know that this has been discussed. We could probably get some further information back about this. And it has been one of the things that the board may recall as we've been talking about organizational structural considerations as well.
Yes.
And it's a little bit convoluted right now, but we can certainly follow up and get some more information on that.
I seem to recall something about keeping track of the training that each of the staff members, the fire department staff members, have had in a consistent manner, so that we ensured that they not only kept their level of training, but identified places where more training was required. I think that was part of it.
That's correct, Chair, and it's in line with the provincial playbook. They are keeping independent records right now. I was looking to have a more consistent approach across the region and ensuring that we have consistent, easy access. So I know it's in progress, but I don't have much more information than that, but you're correct.
Okay. And then number 136, it's talking about capital planning engagement seminars. Development of alternatives to in-person meetings is underway. are we looking at something in addition to Zoom or other, like the programs that we're currently using, or what else are we looking at? Anybody?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So those ones are related to the wastewater facilities. And so they were the additional engagement sessions that we had, the board had directed us to go ahead and do when we did the asset management user rates. So those were scheduled for June. So we're just looking to alternative ways because we had actually booked several venues and actually school facilities to do those. So we're just looking to see whether or not we can do those in a virtual environment.
Okay.
Some of this was actually mentioned at the Monday's water talks too.
Okay, Director McMahon?
Yeah, further to the wastewater meetings, Sunnyside involves only, I think, 7 property owners. So it should be possible to actually hold a meeting, even at Frank West Hall, and keep everybody at a suitable distance. Just throwing it out there because they're sort of chomping at the bit.
Thank you. Any other questions on this page? Director Lee?
First, I'd like to say I really like the format and I really appreciate all the information. I was just wondering, these don't add up to all, I don't think these would add up to all the projects in the budget. So, and I know we get updates on the rest of the items in the budget, but when do we get those kind of updates? I think Tina would know that part.
Yeah, so I think these cover probably about 90% of the items that came forward for budget. The items that aren't included in the budget project status report are things that are included in the operational budget. So things like base budget increases or things that are ongoing staffing positions aren't included in here. So you have probably about 90% of what was talked about there. It's just more of the operational and staffing that aren't included here. So if there's anything here that's not included, because still we have lots of operational projects that are included as part of our work plans. These are just items like projects that were deliberated and approved as like a one-time or a project. So you'd get those type of other reports as part of quarterly or biannual reports for the departments. But again, if there's any questions that aren't here, please direct them to staff.
Yeah, all I need to do is actually just simply look at the numbers, and then I would know what was here and what isn't. So, if I got that right?
I don't know what you're asking. Maybe Tina does. I'm not clear what you're asking.
Yeah, so if you look at the report that we provided the board as part of the budget deliberations, I think that's what Director Lee is mentioning. If you match that against this, there's probably a few short, but because of those items that are operational, like base budget increases, we wouldn't track as a project per se.
Okay, thank you.
So an example would be the increase of the base budget for water mains, replacement of water mains. It's a budget item, but it wouldn't be on here because that was an increase to the basic operational business of the department. Is that correct?
That's correct. That's correct. And we would include an update on that in our quarterly reports.
Okay, is that clear, Director Lee?
Yes. What I've been doing is I've been going back over the budget deliberations and putting everything, all the things in by function number, so I understand. So this is further along than I got, so it's very helpful. Thank you.
Okay. All right, Director Toth, you put your hand up and then took it down. Did we answer your question?
Sort of. You'd mentioned water, and I wanted to ask about the water main rehabilitation work that I know was coming forward this year, but then Remco mentioned a quarterly update, so it can wait.
All right, thank you. And then we have on our list here, we have completed items. So it's nice to see some of these still moving forward. I know your plates are very full with all kinds of stuff and extra. So it's nice to see that we actually are getting some of them complete. Director McMahon.
I'd just like to say that item number 1 was, the timing was perfect. Couldn't have been better. We're online. Awesome.
All right, before we move on to the next item, did we miss any in the package that any of the directors would like to address? Maybe I went too quick or something. Anything there? Director Toth.
I'll probably never find the item number now that we've scrolled past it, but the generator for Garden Bay water treatment, I think said June 2021 for completion. Was item number 64. Just wondering how come such a long lead time on that particular item.
Thank you for the question, Director. I have to say, I don't know the details on why that lead time. I'm sure that those generators, the type of generators may not be easily available, but I will look into that. Okay.
Thank you. I know that it was of particular importance for the area director, so I wanted to just ask that question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Any others? Before we move on. All right. Thank you, staff. Thank you for all the work. I want to mention Tara, because Tara is the one who actually updates this all the time, gathers the information, updates it. You do a fabulous job. Thank you. All right, let's move on to Annex B, pages 10 through 20. This is with regards to the Sunshine Coast Regional District Corporate Financial Variance and Forecast Analysis, COVID-19. So, Tina, did you want to do a bit of an introduction to this one?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So just highlighting the purpose of the report. So the week of the March 16th, of course, we all know the SCRD began the process of closing its offices to the public, including the closure of parks and recreation facilities. So at the same time, the SCRD's Emergency Operations Center was also activated. So soon after that, the financial plan was also amended in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. So many of the SCRD services had to quickly change the way it delivered services to ensure staff and public safety. So some of these changes resulted in either additional expenses and in some cases, some cost savings. So typically we provide variance reports at Q2 and Q3 and then provide a year-end summary. But of course, the purpose of this report is to provide an impact of where we stand to date. So, of course, understanding this is about up to April 30th. So again, we'll provide a subsequent report for the Q3 variance. So today's report is to provide what some possible mitigation options, including service level and financial objectives would be, to then provide the further report as part of the July variance report. Staff have also provided a financial forecast for various scenarios for the services that are most impacted by COVID-19. And these are services which are heavily reliant on user fees, such as transit, solid waste, building inspection, recreation, and so we also wanted to note that most of these impacts are property taxation focused today, but increases for user rates and parcel taxes for water, wastewater, and refuse collection also need to be factored as we move ahead. So recognizing that this information will impact the upcoming budget, staff felt it was important to provide the current situation to the board and for the public. A report is planned for the June 25th Corporate and Administrative Services meeting to prepare for the upcoming budget deliberations. And part of that, a communication and public engagement plan will also be included for discussion. So if the board also explores some service level reductions, a clear communication plan will also have to be contemplated as part of these decisions moving forward. So understanding there's a significant amount of information in the report, senior leadership are available for questions and discussions. So not drilling down into all the parts here. So happy to take questions.
All right, Director Lee.
First of all, I got to compliment staff on an excellent report. I've already reviewed it with my APC and the COVID-19 task force here in Pender, and it answered a lot of questions that the public and I had. And it was very easy to read and very direct to the point. So I just wanted to say thanks for it. A lot of work went into that.
Okay, Director McMahon.
Yeah, I was trying to get my head around the impact of COVID on recreation. And there are pieces, in a number of different places in the report and the attached full budget report. So the recreation facilities were closed in mid-March, but it appears that wages and benefits are 98% of the budgeted amount. That's on page 20 of the attached report, I believe. I'm having a hard time figuring this out. Also, it said that we gave 11 layoff notices, which I assume were mostly recreation related, but I don't know how many staff we have that normally work in the 5 recreation facilities. So it almost appears like it's more expensive to operate our facilities when they're closed than when they're open, which seems sort of counterintuitive. So I was wondering if somebody could help me understand what's going on there.
Okay, who wants to take that one? Tina or GM Hall?
Thank you, Chair. I can speak to some questions that were included in the director's comments. To say that our recreation staffing complement totals at a seasonal peak probably close to 50. That includes a large number of casual employees, and as noted in the staff report, those casual employees have not been working in their regular duties. There are, I guess, net, whether it's more expensive to operate the facilities, or whether it's more expensive to run the facilities without them being open to the public. Well, certainly user fee revenue is an important part of the budget for this service, and without that, the bottom line is drastically affected, as noted on page 17 of the staff report. And a lot of there's a lot of overhead in this service relating to keeping the buildings safe, secure, and operated according to provincial regulations, particularly for ice plants, where they have to be staffed with an engineer. But staff have taken steps where we can to reduce that overhead, changing thermostats, things like that, to attempt to mitigate that gap that we're seeing with not having user fees come in. Thank you.
Director McMahon, did that answer your question, or are you looking for a little more?
Yeah, I would actually like a little more. It occurred to me that with some of the layoffs might have been accompanied by payouts that would, inflate the staff costs temporarily. But my math says that our staffing costs are close to 40%. And there was a reference in there somewhere that I can't find right now that said that our user fees are about 30%. So that's still a fair gap in there. And just, I'm wondering how we're going to go forward on this. because right now we're taxing at the same level for a service that our constituents can't receive. So it becomes something of a problem. And then going forward, we don't know how we would reopen. And we may have to reopen in a format that's even more expensive to operate for fewer patrons. So I worry about this. Sorry, that's vague.
I think one of the conversations, I'm gonna put this out there. I think most of you are aware of this, but so the provincial recreation organization, for example, is in conversation with the province, as is BC Transit, because we're not the only area that has revenue challenges because of COVID-19. So both organizations are in conversation with the province to see if the province will help mitigate some of the expenses that we're all incurring while not having the revenue stream coming in. So the picture we have now is the status quo currently. We don't know if and when these facilities open or return to any kind of normal operating. And we don't know what the response from the province will be to help mitigate some of the impacts on the various governments, right? So this is where we're at now, and there's still a lot of unknowns going forward in all of these areas. So I think what staff are looking to do, bringing this forward now, is saying, look, this is where we're at, knowing what we know. We need to let the community know that given where we are running deficits in a lot of these areas. And the only way for us to make up those deficits is at year end, when we consider our budget for next year, we need to cover off those deficits. So if this continues, it will translate to a tax increase next year because we have to pay for these costs. And between now and the end of the year, things could happen that will totally change this picture, and we don't know what that looks like. But we didn't want to leave it longer for the community so that they were aware that we have some challenges that we're going to need to look at addressing, and we are identifying them as we go forward. Part of the communication strategy, I think, that we talked about at the agenda review was for Director Pratt to work with staff to distill some of this information and actually get it out to the public now. So that, because we know a lot of the public don't read these agendas, don't go through this in detail, but this is important information that we need to get out to them now to let them know that this is where we're at. So, I totally relate to your questions, and there's still a lot of unknowns around that at this point. So we are keeping the buildings open, they're not open to the public, but they're still operational because we don't know when they're going to come back online. And there are costs that we're incurring to ensure that they're ready to go when that happens. And there are, utilities, there's, all the different kinds of things. So yes, it is expensive. Anything further, Director McMahon, on that one?
Nope, but you can put me in the queue after other people get a turn.
Perfect. I'll add you on the end. Okay, so I've got Director Lee, Tice, Hiltz, and then back to McMahon.
Darnelda, our CEO wants to speak.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Mr. McKinley, go over to you. You get to jump the queue.
Yeah, sorry about that. I just wanted just a bit of a follow-up to Director McMahon's questions. And Chair, thank you for your remarks as well, because you summarized well what one of the larger challenges is going to be for local governments as we look to restart recreation centers. Restarting our recreation centers is going to look a lot different than when they were open previously. It's going to require probably all of the costs, maybe even additional, and probably half or less of the revenue. I know that the BC Recreation Professionals Association is looking at lobbying the province to try to get some relief, because in a lot of places, and the Sunshine Coast would be one of them, public recreation facilities are the recreation facilities available to the public on the coast. There's not a lot of private facilities available that are duplicating what we are providing as a public service. With specific reference to some of the ongoing staffing costs at the rec centers, in addition to having the buildings open on minimums, we have to provide such certain levels of service just to keep the buildings open because there's ammonia plants and different things. Plus, we've been using 2 of our facilities for showers. When we did the original, when the board originally approved some mitigative measures and budget amendments to deal with COVID, one of the things that was approved was the continuing payment of staff for a period of time. In addition to that, there was a second approval that said that for things like, I think it was for the community ambassadors, for example, there was an approval that risk managed an amount of money pending notification from the province as to whether or not they were going to reimburse us for some of those things. So those, not all of those costs are going to able to be recovered. So that's all of those, that extra work was provided by staff from the recreation facilities that might have not had work otherwise. So those are things that have factored in there as well. I just wanted to sort of remind us all of some of the other decisions that we made. All of those were around rec staff, and then acknowledging Chair Seegers that you're right. Moving forward in recreation is going to be a challenge, and it's going to be a real balancing act to find out how important is the provision of public recreation services in a post-COVID environment, where, if anything, already, and Tina, you can clarify this, I think we probably run at around an 18% cost recovery rate based on user fees alone. That's going to go down. So the taxation for recreation to provide what will end up being, less people in the building probably, at least for the remainder of 2020, 2021, until we really know what this looks like in the future, is going to require an increase in taxation.
All right, thank you for that. Director Lee, you were next.
I think my question was almost answered, but under the financial implications, I added the 2 together and they come up that we right now are looking at an 8.8% increase for next year. And in fact, if we open the facilities and including the pool in Pender, this thing's going to go up dramatically. And so I'm saying that we gotta start with that as a minimum, because them's the facts that we know. And the message has also got to be that it's going to get worse unless we get government assistance. So I just, but my question was answered because you told me we already have a plan to communicate. So thank you.
Okay, Director Ties.
Thank you, Chair. My question is around transit. I'm just wondering if there's a time frame as to when we're looking to go back to non-Saturday service.
Mr. Rosenboom.
Thank you for the question. The provincial plan for BC Transit is to maintain the current service levels throughout the summer. We identified through BC Transit that for our system, we see some challenges there because in the summer we usually have an increase in ridership due to a lot of tourism and groups visiting the coast. So we're currently in discussion with BC Transit on what our summer schedule will look like. At the same time, BC Ferry changed their schedule, so we are currently scrambling to see what we can do with BC Transit to also change our schedule accordingly, so that there is at least some kind of alignment with their schedule. But in terms of schedule, in terms of transit, there are 2 things to consider. There's the capacity on the bus, as well as the number of buses, the schedule itself. And the schedule itself is currently expected to maintain what it is right now with a little bit of extra throughout the summer. And then the intent of BC Transit is to go back to normal as of September. However, doing so would also have a significant financial implication to us, because part of the current forecast analysis is based on the entire schedule to be run. So if we would keep a reduced schedule, we would actually reduce cost as well. And in terms of the maximum amount of riders on the bus, passengers on the bus, that's expected to slowly be increased as well from the current 50% to more around 70% in the upcoming months. So that will also allow a little bit more passengers to ride. However, until the end of the year, I don't see that in any way we can get back to 100% ridership and 100% revenue until the end of the year.
Okay, Director Hilt.
Thanks, Chair. There is a lot in the report, and I guess I looked down at on page 18 where staff is seeking direction on service level and financial objectives.
Yes.
This is the question, and I'm going, how do I make this decision? How does the board make this decision? And I looked at the financial sustainability policy, and it doesn't really tell you how to manage unknowns, pandemics, and how to go forward. And so what can actually be decided? I'm also hearing the auditor saying, go through scenario analysis, try to remove the unknowns and put in the known bits so you can make better decision making. So I'm going, what can we do with this report today? I'm going, staff wants some decisions, and we're board going, what can we do? So I'm going, what kind of decisions can we make about this report? I'm not quite certain what staff is asking for.
Okay, I think what we're going to do is, once we've gotten through the general questions here, I'd like to go back and start on page 16 and look at the major ones: transit, regional solid waste, and discuss each of them individually. See if staff can come forward with any suggestions for us of things that we could look at, where we're sitting at this point, and then there may not be any decisions to be made today, given the information we have. But if there are, staff would like to know that, so that when they come back with the next review, they'll have taken into account any of those sorts of things that we can identify for them. Does that help?
Yes, I think so. And so the follow-up is, what are the guiding documents that the board would use to make these decisions?
Tina, any idea?
I can jump in there a little bit, and Tina, feel free to provide some follow-up. I guess what we're looking for from the board is helping us establish the playing field that we'll be playing with as we bring more options forward. Essentially, if we leave it wide open, staff can spin you 28 different scenarios based on a whole bunch of different things, from reduced service levels in every department to cost-cutting measures to staffing to soup to nuts. We could do all kinds of things, but the amount of time that would take would be difficult. So what we're looking for is some help defining the playing field, defining some of the areas you'd like us to come back with different scenarios in, to help us focus our work, so we're not using a shotgun, we're using not quite a scalpel, but a little bit closer. Tina, did you have any follow-up for that?
No, I think that's very well put. It's to see what is within scope. So to answer one of the other questions, guiding documents. These are policy level decisions, in the sense that the board decides service levels. So if that was something the board wants to contemplate, staff would like to understand what's within scope and what's not within scope.
Thank you. Okay, Director Hiltz, does that answer your question at this point? Thank you. Director McMahon, and then Director Lee.
Yeah, I'll come back to recreation, but it sounds like we're going to go through these individually too. Building inspection. How are we managing building inspection right now? I've heard anecdotally that it's slow, that some of the contractors are having difficulty getting building inspection done and are feeling kind of frustrated. So I just would like a little more elaboration on that one.
You mean like how the operation part is happening?
Yeah, I
Or-
mean,
okay.
I seem to remember that we were doing that remotely, and I have a suspicion that maybe some of the contractors are not well equipped to deal in that environment. Let's just say that. So, what are our challenges in continuing to perform an important service like building inspection?
Okay. GM Hall.
Thank you for the question, Chair. So our building inspection service continues, and we have been, it's, I guess you could say, semi-virtual service where we have limited, we're abided by health orders and guidance, and we have a limited staff working in the office, and the more or less a team A, team B. They alternate time in the office and time working remotely. And we continue to provide inspection services in the field, following protocols that, again, meet those health orders, as well as advice from the Building Officials Association of BC. And it is a busy time of year where we tend to see lots of applications, and sometimes that does result in some delays to offering inspections. But by and large, we are meeting our typical service turnarounds. And so if permit holders are having specific challenges, I encourage them to contact our chief building official, and staff can work through that. Through the changes that have happened as a result of COVID, we have actually virtualized a few pieces of the process internally that have streamlined things somewhat. And although we're not offering counter service, we have continued to have good communication with applicants and developed a way for people to provide documents to the regional district and receive permits. Thanks.
Hey, Director Lee.
I'm back to the previous topic. I hadn't anticipated being asked to assist in this, but my comment that I wrote down is simply what are our options. I look at it kind of a reverse of how we arrived at our staffing counts, where we got the recommendations on what was needed, and then we went backwards to see what we thought we could afford. This situation is one of planning for next year in order to minimize the increases that we normally know, minimize the increases that we know are going to happen. We just don't know how big they are. So this is something new for us going into a budget cycle. We need to understand the themes of what we could do and then apply it to the possible projects. And our GMs and our CFO are really the experts in doing the analysis of what might be possible. It then becomes our job to say, well, if this might be possible, do we want to do it or not?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know how we're going to get into that dance, but I'm not sure we're ready right now for it.
We're going to get into it at least a little bit. GM Rosenboom.
Yeah, thank you. I think it also depends on the different services. For some services, there might be still an opportunity to make a service level change this year, while for others, it's not possible. I'm looking at two services that are provided by my department. As I just indicated, transit service level reduction could include maintaining a reduced schedule for a longer period of time as an option. So that it's a service level decision. If you want us to explore that, we can do that. Another, for example, on the solid waste side, reducing service will be more a challenge because it's more driven by the amount of people that are showing up at the landfill and would like to get rid of their waste. So, however, if you tell us, give us, we don't want to give us an option that where give us some scenarios to make sure that our transit deficit at the end of the year is not exceeding amount X, we might be able to do that as well. So for some it's more service level decisions, and for others it can be provide as well some direction of what is an potentially acceptable deficit, and then we can match the service level accordingly.
Okay, Director Hiltz, you had your hand up and you took it down. You're okay? Okay, Director McMahon, over to you.
One of the aspects of our budget that received a lot of attention earlier in the year was hiring. We had fairly extensive hiring plans, and I'm wondering how COVID has impacted that, because it certainly complicated a whole bunch. And whether this, well, I presume if we can't hire people to do work, then we can't get work done. So that I assume there's a sort of a snowball effect here.
And who wants to take that? Mr. Parker, is that over to you?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, it has been challenging to shift and come up with new processes, but we have been able to do that. We have migrated all of our job postings to an online process, front facing on our website. And we have continued to see some staff turnover. Some staff have retired, for example, or moved on to other opportunities. But we are moving forward in a methodical manner with the hiring that we're able to do, and based on the approved budget. Thank you.
Mr. McKinley, you unmuted yourself. Did you want to address this?
I think Jerry actually did a pretty good job addressing it. The only other thing I'd add is more of just a comment to Director Lee's questions and comments. And one of those is that this isn't just an exercise that we're looking at doing so we can mitigate the increases in 2021. Some of the things that we'd be doing is looking at trying to mitigate the 2021 increases by making changes now. If we were to run projections based on doing nothing, then at the next quarter review, when Tina comes back with the next analysis, these deficits are going to continue potentially to grow. Although, like we all recognize, there's still more unknowns than knowns. But some of the mitigative measures we would be doing to directly try to influence these numbers for 2020, not just for 2021.
Okay, Director McMahon, did you have a follow-up?
Yeah, I just wanted to say I'll be interested to hear, probably at a future meeting, how the COVID situation affects the number of applicants that we get for open positions. Because if they already live on the coast, then it probably won't affect it, except perhaps that there's more people looking for work. But if we're recruiting for senior positions where typically we attract off-coast applicants, I'll be curious to see what the effect is.
Director Pratt and then Director Tice.
Thank you. Just I guess a note for staff that if you do find any opportunities where we as a board can advocate to the senior levels of government for any policy change or funding synergies that may work for us to help mitigate some of these costs, just keep an eye on that and let us know, because we're certainly happy to do that. We continue to meet regularly with our member of parliament and our MLA, and if there's as we see issues emerging, for example, around the transit piece, we're certainly happy to bring any of those forward.
Thank you, Director Tice.
Thank you, Chair. In this whole discussion, the one thing, I guess, one of the bigger unknowns is the amount of assistance we're going to receive from the provincial as well as the federal governments, and that I think that really can influence the decisions that we make. And the one thing that comes to my mind in this regard is that while provincial and federal governments can incur deficits, I don't think we should treat them as cash cows and just run on full steam ahead, in quotation marks, because ultimately we're still going to have to repay that on a provincial and a federal level, and so I think ultimately I'm proposing sort of a fiscally restrained management of this whole situation, whether we get assistance from the BC government or not, or the federal government or not.
All right, so let's go to page 16. Let's start with transit. So I'd look to, GM Rosenboom. What are some of the options that we have available to us here, given that BC Transit, I mean, how much do they dictate to us what we do and what we don't do?
Thank you for the question. Where I don't want to have, where I would like to follow the guidance from BC Transit is in terms of the safety measures in place on the bus, which includes the maximum capacity at each bus. And because that is because of safety, but it has, of course, a financial impact as well, because there's less ridership possible per bus. So in order to move the same amount of people, for example, from the ferry, we might need to run then 2 buses back to back, or, and that is a service level decision, accept a certain amount of pass ups where we just drive by, stop because the bus is full. But on the capacity side, I suggest to not to accept the lead from BC Transit. On the schedule side, we've reduced our schedule by significantly in April, and from our size systems within the province, we were one of the few that really went down significantly, and it really helped us to reduce the cost also significantly that we're making. Otherwise, the budget would have been looked differently. So there is an option there to say, what will be the summer schedule? Do we go back up as soon as possible? We know that in terms of ridership, the more buses you have on the road, the sooner you also get people in the bus. That's usually the case, but I think in this era, a feeling of comfort and safety is important as well. So I think in terms of options, BC Transit is aware of the fact that we're having this discussion now with the board, and on Monday I have follow-up discussions with them about scheduling for next several months. And so there is an opportunity for the board to provide me with some guidance on how quickly they would like to return to, let's say, 70-80% of our regular schedule, or that they prefer the summer, that we maintain the current schedule as much as possible, maybe with some extra buses to move some, to accommodate some peaks, and by doing so, accept maybe that some buses will be full and there will be some pass-ups, but it could really be a financial benefit for the community.
Okay, Director McMahon?
So far, everything that you're saying makes sense to me. So I had 2 questions. One is, if there's a decision about increasing service levels in September, what's the lag time on that? Like, how many months or weeks ahead do you need to make that decision before you can implement it in September? And my other question is, what's happening with Handy Dart?
Thank you. I'll first answer the second question and then go back to the first. Handy Dart, we're providing Handy Dart service and will continue to provide Handy Dart service. And Handy Dart service has not decreased our ability to provide that at all. The only thing that has changed is the number of people that we can move around in a vehicle. But to date, it has not resulted in any, passengers, handicapped passengers not being able to get to where they would like to go. The other question, how much lead time do we need? If we need to go back, if we want to go back, for example, to our regular fall schedule, that schedule is completely worked out, that's fine. What we're currently doing is adjusting our schedule to the BC Ferry schedule, which is odd times that we're not used to. And that's a lot of work. That's almost a 24-hour production line currently at BC Transit to figure that piece out. If we go back to, that's why we went back in April to a Saturday schedule, because we knew what the routes would be. We knew what the time would be that the bus would, that the driver need to show up and the bus would come by a stop. So that's why going back to, we can run the entire summer schedule and a full schedule in 2 weeks from now. That will be no issue. So schedule changes to known schedules are easy. Schedule changes to unknown schedules are more difficult.
Okay, Director Pratt.
Thank you. I put my hand up just right before you said BC Ferry schedule, because, and of course, we'll be discussing that a little bit later in the meeting, but it's interesting to note that, we get maybe a week or not, what was it, about a week and a half, maybe 2 weeks notice on a massive change in BC Ferry scheduling. And which now we have to change our transit routes for, or adjust or consider that, which it's an additional stress. So I'm curious, does BC Ferries actually connect with us prior to changing the schedule, or is it just happen and we find out in the news release or through social media like the rest of the public?
Yeah.
We did not receive heads up. We received the message through the media and as well as through BC Ferries, through BC Transit. So
okay, yeah. Okay, so a couple of questions, and I'll follow up on that one too. So you said with regards to capacity, you'd like to follow BC Transit's lead. So I guess the question is, what is BC Transit's lead on that? Because what we're hearing from other communities, like I don't know if it's in Lower Mainland, but I know in other provinces, what they're saying is for transit, they are moving them back up to full capacity in some cases and making mask wearing mandatory in order to use those. So what is BC Transit's lead on this? What are they putting out? And what does that look like for us then? What are the implications?
BC Transit on this point is working closely with the other transit companies in the province, and jointly they're working with a provincial health officer. So all, in terms of safety measures on the bus, they're all equal for any transit service in BC. And in terms of masks, the wearing of masks by passengers is encouraged, not mandatory, but it's strongly encouraged. There are extra safety measures in place for drivers. And for between June and August, I'm reading at my document here, it's about 50%, 50-60% of maximum capacity per bus. And from September onwards, they're aiming to ramp it up to 60 to 90%. However, I have to say that in the summer, our capacity is at the bus is currently used to be sometimes 110%, 120% because people were standing, and that's not included in these numbers. So there's a significant drop in our summer capacity. So that's why, but we're totally have no clue on how many food passengers there will be on the ferries over the summer, because there will be no camps, etc., which usually used to be a large amount of food passengers that were taking transit.
So what we're hearing is that overnight camping will be opening up as of June 1st. That's the plan. If everything continues to go as it is. And we don't know if that's 100% capacity of those places or 50% again. We're hearing 50%, so every other campsite, for example, but that could still play into that. Is it possible to continue with, I mean, and this is a follow-up to Director McMahon's previous question and Director Pratt's. We know that BC Ferries is going to be changing their schedule in July and August. We don't know what that looks like yet. We know they're going to be changing because they've only put out the month of June at this point. So given that, given we don't know what's going to happen with the provincial health officer in opening up, going to the next phase and what that looks like, could we continue right now saying we're going to continue on with the Saturday schedule? And if there are pressures, you know, we start seeing a lot of numbers coming, can we then ramp up and add in, but continue on with Saturday for now, and then react based on stuff coming at us?
Thank you for the question. We have the ability to continue our current schedule until September 1st, and we have agreed with BC Transit that we have the ability to put some extra buses on the road to address some peaks that we expect. And so they are not part of our regular schedule, but for example, our regular schedule, but instead of one bus, have two buses running just back to back. So that way we can accommodate some peaks to be expected at some ferry runs. So that is definitely an option, that we run our current schedule, but maybe only with increased capacity to address some peaks.
Okay, Director McMahon?
Yeah, meeting the ferries is important if we can do it. They're certainly making it challenging to keep up. Have we been in touch with the camps like Bing, Olive, and Elphinstone to find out if they are planning to reopen this summer?
Right. Do we know?
I can speak for Scouts specifically because my daughter's in Scouts. There will be no summer programming for Scouts.
Okay.
And I know from YMCA that's the case as well.
Okay. Any other questions? Meantime, BC Ferries, Andy Dart. I know school is opening June 1st, but I believe, did we hear anything back? So Director Pratt, did we hear anything back about impacts on transit?
Well, right now, just hang on one second. I'll just find the message from the chair of the chair of the school district. So right now they're expecting 20% capacity of students from grades 6 to 12. So which would typically be ones that would be either, some of them would be taking our transit services. The majority of them will be taking the bus. Or the school bus, I should say, or their parents will be driving them. But so that's only 20% of capacity across the school district. So 20% of probably about 1,000 to 1,500 students. And they're already going to be, most of them will only be 1 day a week. So probably not a huge impact on public transit. She's going to get back to me on that. And yeah, so that, and it's only for the month of June.
Okay. Director Hiltz?
Thanks. Any news on the Next Bus Coming app? That's supposed to happen this year, I understand. Is that still planned for from BC Transit's point of view?
Thank you for the question. BC Transit is actually is currently reviewing their own expenditures and their own programs, and to see where they can speed up certain items, or just like Will SUD is doing, seeing where they can discontinue certain services they used to provide, because they know that they're old era, they're pre-COVID. So the electronic, the smart bus concept is one of the things that they're expediting at the moment. So how that will impact, what it will mean for our system, it was planned for this year, next year. Things are a little bit delayed, of course, on the implementation side, but I expect to hear updates from them soon on that. I'll ask when I meet with them next time. In terms of moving this forward, if the board would like, they can, of course, make a recommendation to me. How it stands right now, my discussion with on service levels for the summer, and I can always report back in July, and based on at the end of July, and based on the information we have available then, and today the discussion on how to move forward in September. And of course, the elephant in the room is also we don't know if there will be a second spike or not, and what that will mean again.
That's right. Before I get to Director McMahon, one of the questions that I'm wondering is, does our schedule work for those who are actually working, like those in our communities? Does it get them to work on time? You know, can they take transit to actually do their jobs? Do we know? Or is it the times are all different, so it's hard to tell?
The times are different, but we still aim to provide service spread out the day between very early in the morning to our usual evening. So it's maybe they have to wait a little bit longer, but the first bus and last bus will continue to ride at about the same time as they used to do.
Okay. Director McMahon, Director Lee?
I'm happy with the direction I'm hearing here. This sounds good, and look at it again in July. A small silver lining here is that I expect the ferries will actually run on time. We can hope. So we won't have that messing up our transit schedule.
Thank you. Director Lee?
I was actually interested in following the conversation, but I was wondering if the discussion was making sure transit meets the needs during COVID-19, or are we talking how to reduce the cost of transit to minimize our budget for next year and for the rest of this year?
Jim?
Thank you for the question. Good question. Currently, our ridership is about 15 to 20% of what it normally is. There are situations where we do have some pass ups where the bus is full, primarily on the 90 and 1, and those are the those are the routes where we currently and could continue to put an extra bus on the road to make sure that we reduce that impact. So currently, yes, we're meeting the needs of the residents of the community.
So I think to your question, Director Lee, we're actually looking at doing both, right? So if the direction we give is continue with our Saturday schedule at this time and add additional buses as needed to meet the needs of the community, we're doing both. And coming back in July with an update, because at that point we'll also know what BC Ferry's schedule is like. Then we can take another direction at that point. So would you like, Director Rosenbluth, GM Rosenbluth, would you like, yeah, you get up to this level and you get less pay, yeah. Would you like us to make a recommendation to this effect, or are you just going to continue on doing what you're doing? What would you like?
Maybe a recommendation that could sound like, and that the transit schedule, current schedule, is maintained for June, July, and August until further, and then we can change it if we want to add later.
Okay, and inside of maintaining that, does that also give you the ability to add additional buses as needed?
Yes.
Okay. Would someone like to make that recommendation? Moved and seconded? All right, any further discussion on this? Director Kroll. Sorry, didn't see your hand up there.
It's okay. Certainly maintaining the Saturday schedule works. The whole caveat in the whole thing is going to be what BC Ferries do to us at the end of the next month. So I'm all in favor of. The other just very quick question I had is, I'm assuming the bus service monitors BC Ferries volumes, and how quickly can a second bus be added into the loop to give, so people aren't left standing at the side of the road because the bus is overloaded?
One day. If we know that if something is going sideways on a Saturday and we expect the same thing on a Sunday, we can call an additional driver for that Sunday.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, any other questions before we vote on the motion? Director Lee?
No, not on the motion. Sorry, I wanted to talk about maybe perhaps some other things we could do separate from making sure the bus is full or not. But that's
Okay.
a discussion.
Okay. So all those in favor of the motion on the floor? Thank you. And Director Lee, is this with regards to transit still then?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
I've been thinking about since we started talking about what we were going to discuss options at a high level and see if we can see what projects we might be able to start now that help us this year and next year. And my first question actually was, I think we need to focus on capital projects to go forward, because those are the best ones to do, because our staff gets paid as part of the capital, and we cut down our expense by having our staff work on capital projects which are spread over the next 20 years if they're true capital. So I think capital is good. And I think on the other side, expense projects aren't, because those can't be spread. Those are money spent this year, money spent next year. So thinking that through logically, I thought, well, what's the best thing we could do for capital for transit? And you were talking about expense, of course, which is running the schedules and meeting the demand. The only thing you can do there is not meet the demand, just run where you've got real good routes. And I don't know that there's an appetite for that, but that's something to think about. But the other thing you could do is reduce your costs of the bus themselves. Electric buses reduce your cost a lot. Running a smaller electric bus for Handy Dart would really reduce your expense for the Handy Dart. So my question was, is there any reason to look into that, or is it just pie in the sky that wouldn't work?
Thank you for the question. BC Transit currently doesn't have the buses available if we would even look for that. There's about a 2-year time between us requesting a new bus and them being able to provide one. And currently there are no buses being produced at all.
Director Hiltz.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, further to the transit, has there been any discussion about accommodating more bicycle traffic? We're hearing this I'm hearing this out of Vancouver, lots more bikes, and the potential for more multimodal, using the bike lockers. Is anything like that being looked at?
Okay.
We currently have our bike locker program. There are still bike lockers at several places on the coast, including at the terminal. They're not very low usage on them. They're usually used for other purposes than storing bikes. And all our transit buses, of course, have the ability to move bikes around. And they do frequently, but I'm not aware of the fact that there is any limitation that there are potential users of those bike racks on the buses, and there is no capacity to actually use them because they're already full. So I can look into that.
All right, I think it's going to take us a bit to get through the rest of this report. I'd like to have a break at this point. It is 11:10. 5 minutes? Does that work for everybody? Or do you need longer? 5 minutes? Okay. Let's come back at 11:15. See you then. Thank you. Welcome back from the break. We are now on page 16, and we're going to talk about regional solid waste. So, Director Hiltz, you have your hand up. Should we go to the director or to the GM first, or do you have something to bring up here?
I just had a question on transit. Just
perfect.
Of the chart that we had with the Saturday, which of the scenarios are we looking at? The 25, the 50, or the 75? Or is that actually, yeah? Are we in one of those boxes?
Thank you for the question. We're outside of one of these boxes because these boxes are based on current schedule, and with reduction of the schedule for the next couple of months, we would need to update these numbers based on that, because this is based on the full schedule, not on the reduced schedule.
Okay. Any other questions on transit before we move on to solid waste? All right, over to you, GM Rosenboom.
Thank you very much. Solid waste is different in the sense of that our usage of our facilities has not been impacted by COVID. However, our operational costs do. We are more staff time. We have had some additional expenditures. We're processing more materials than we used to do, and so especially in some of those materials are not completely budget neutral. So we're running a little bit higher in the operational side compared to the revenue side. So I know that in 2013, the decision was made to, in an attempt to reduce the deficit at that time, to close the landfill for one day. It actually resulted in us need to bring in additional staff the next day. And in the current scenario, where we're also limiting the number of residents that actually in the drop-off area, and we currently have a smaller drop area than we used to. Closing landfill would actually only result in longer lineups in the other days. In terms of options to reduce the deficit at the end of the year, there are some options to not proceed with some programs this year, like backroad trash bash. We have a community grant program for solid waste initiatives. Others would be we can delay the start of the program to initiate drop-off areas in Bender Harbor to next year. So there are some small items. Another opportunity is to increase tipping fees. That would increase on the revenue side. So another would be to really reduce the service levels in terms of, let's put it that way, there are still decisions to be made this year on what to do with the South Coast drop-off side. So there might be an opportunity there as well to create savings. I'll leave it there for now.
Director Ties and then Director Kroll.
Thank you, Chair. My first question was whether, I know this would all be very anecdotal, but the increase in traffic to the landfill, I'm guessing, is people having time on their hands to clear out their junk out of the yards and their crawl spaces, and I'm wondering if this was sort of a temporary surge, and then if we're seeing less traffic, or if people are going back to work and we're seeing less tourism. I do anticipate that there'll be less traffic coming to the landfill. I don't think it's going to be substantially less, but I guess these are just things to consider. And I'll think of my next question.
Jim?
My only comment to that is we're currently not seeing it slowing down yet. Compared to last year, for example, at the Seashell landfill, we're still at about the same number of residents, order of magnitude, while actually we diverted all the wood waste to Sailor Souls. So actually we would have expected to see a drop, and we're not seeing the drop compared to last year. So how that will transpire over the summer in the tourism, people will stay also, maybe less tourists, but more people stay at home. More people at home might also mean more jobs they do, renovations they initiate, etc., etc.
Director Kroll.
Thank you. I think Director Tighe sort of captured part of what I was going to ask, and I'm assuming it's probably too soon to sort of project with this increased volume coming into the landfill, the impact it's going to have. The big concern I have with respect to trying to, recapture this deficit by going to higher fees is it usually ends up with stuff being dumped where we don't want it, which adds to additional cost. And then there's the whole issue of stuff that's still going to the landfill that really should be probably recycled. And I'm wondering if there is an option to maybe put a little more emphasis on materials that are recyclable, and rather than directing people to the landfill, is direct them to one of the recycle depots.
Okay, and Jim?
Yes, there can be that additional focus on recycling and reuse. Not sure if there will, but there won't have any financial implications for us. If more material is being not sent to landfill, it will reduce a little bit the revenue, and but on the expenditure side, there is maybe a slight difference, but not a lot. But definitely we can do that, especially in this time.
Mm-hmm. Director Toth. I've got Toth, then McMahon, and then Lee.
Thank you. GM Rosenboom sort of touched on it with the tourist traffic or the seasonal increase in population around here, but the that $70,000 per month bump that we saw in 2019, do we really actually have any idea of how much of that is attributable to either tourism or cottage dwellers? I know that when I'm doing my yard cleanup, for example, I don't want to do it in the dead of winter, so I'm always doing it in the summertime anyways. Do we know, I guess that's the question, do we know how much of that $70,000 bump is actually attributable to tourism or cottage traffic?
Go ahead.
No, we don't. We see that there's a seasonal peak, and but if it's people to the coast with second houses, or it's the residents themselves, but there is a seasonal peak usually.
Thank you. Director McMahon?
Yeah, a lot of things are being refused for reuse or recycle right now, right? You can't take anything to the thrift shop. You can't get rid of books. So it's piling up here in my office. And do we have any idea when those kind of recycling and reuse options will open up, and if there's anything that we can sort of do to encourage them? Because otherwise they're going to end up in the landfill.
Jim?
Thank you for the question. I'm not aware the bottles that program. That's because that's not an SRD program, but and I'm not aware of. I'm not up to date there. In terms of books, books are currently have continued to be accepted at Gibson's recycling depot. What is being suspended for a while is residents going there to pick up books for reuse, because then there is a touching and too many people. So, but if there is second used books or books can still be delivered to the Gibson Depot for recycling purposes.
So I do know that Caps Off in Seashell is now open. If you've got bottles, cans, whatever, they're open. And I did see a notice somewhere, maybe in the paper on Friday, that the thrift store, the Salvation Army thrift store, is actually looking at opening. So I think we're going to start seeing some of those come on board in the next short while. I have Director Lee. Or Director Mann, did you have a follow-up to that or another question?
Yeah, do we not have a directory of places that people can recycle on the Sunshine Coast? Is it updated or is it a fixed thing? Is it possible for us to update it for people to try and, encourage them to reuse?
Jan?
I'll look into that, and if possible, short term, we will see what we can do, at least to maybe boost it on social media.
Thank you. Director Lee and then Director Hilt.
I was actually thinking about the expense side and what we could stop doing or perhaps make it cheaper. So I just throwing some ideas out there because I don't know if they're worth exploring or not. I'm sure GM Rosenblum can tell me off the top of his head, most likely.
Mm-hmm.
I did see the solid waste, food waste in Pender as something that could be put off if it would save us some money. It would make more. It would make more garbage, but probably not that much. Green waste is straight expense for us. Is there anything we can do about it? Should we stop taking it and let them burn it, which is what they used to do? Desperate times call for desperate measures, Could we stop taking it or just chip straight on site with our existing people? I don't know that. Could we train them, put money into our own chipper and run her through there? Should we be chipping our wood on site, including the dirty? You can get a chipper that'll chip the dirty wood, and it's easier to transport. And in fact, we maybe could use it as bark mulch somewhere and cut our cost out. Recycling is a big money loser, unfortunately. We need to do something about it. We could bury it cheaper. We could stop taking it at the landfill and the transfer station and take it to our recycling depots. And they got a contract already, so they can't get us this year, but I'm pretty sure they'd get us in 2021 though. But anyways, that's a thought. Have they got the capacity if we took the stuff straight there? And stop the coupons and the Good Samaritan for 2020 and 2021. Dead short. Straight cash, straight tax. Of course, we need to get our share shack open. It's run by our existing staff. It's not good to have it closed. And also, could we get a mattress squisher? In other words, can we put some capital out there and save ourselves some expense and some landfill? And I'm not sure reuse is going to save us anything, but it sure is a good idea. It saves us, at the very least, it saves us landfill for the future. And then the last thing is, should we put off planning for a landfill replacement, because that's straight expense? Should we put it off until the end of next year and then try and make her happen real quick? I don't know, but that would save us money too. It'd save us money this year and next year. So those are all my little questions there. I've been scribbling away here.
Did you want to address any of those, GM Rosenblum?
I can, and if there's a big one that I miss, please remind me. Put up landfill replacement. Start with the last one. I would not recommend that given the situation we're in. I think that study that I really suggest that study to be completed, and putting it off won't have an impact on our actual expenditures because it's already we already received the taxation, and it's a one-time expense. Mattress squisher. Mattresses are currently being recycled. We're bringing them to a recycler in Vancouver, so they're not being buried at the moment. Share shed is currently closed in Pender due to COVID reasons and not because of expense reasons. And yes, we'll see what we could do in terms of reopening there. Stop coupon programs for this year would not make a difference for all the areas except for Pender. It would make a difference there because that's funded by taxation while the other ones are from user fees. Good Samaritan program could be stopped, just like as I indicated, some programs, the backroad trash bash, etc. Green waste. We currently have a processing contract in place, but we are currently out for tender for our South Coast drop-off site. One option that has been considered in the past is to not have a drop-off site and not have a drop-off site and direct people from the South Coast to direct it to Seashell to share the soils instead of having a separate drop-off site, and that would on annual basis, it would be anywhere between $175,000 and $200,000 savings.
Okay.
And a chipper is about $1 million.
Okay, Director Hilt.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I'm looking back at last week's source of funding for taxation for regional solid waste, which is a really nice little summary of what can and can't be done on the expense side. And there's not a lot of expense side savings from the Samaritan program is small. So I guess the only one I was kind of looking at is the landfill contributions is one aspect, which is scheduled to go up $125,000. And then there's the tipping fees. I'm thinking COVID surcharge fee. Is that being done anywhere? Like we're hearing of COVID surcharges there for getting your hair cut. Can we do this kind of stuff as a short term, as a temporary measure, or is that just the same thing as raising tipping fees? And I guess I'd like some information about the significance of increasing the tipping fees. It's how we raise revenue. So doesn't look like a lot of savings on the expense side. So I'm going, what can we do on the tipping fee side?
GM?
We can, in general terms, also to advance the discussion, we can look at in surcharges. We can amend the bylaw to increase our tipping fees to added surcharge. That is an option we can explore, and we can provide the board with some options there. At the same time, we can provide an overview, more detailed overview of where cost savings can be made in terms of program delivery. And those are two things we can bring back to the board. But some direction on whether would be preferred or a mix or both would be helpful, because I think this is one where it's less clear on for staff on what the best way forward. It would be more difficult for me to make a recommendation on this one than it was on transit on how to advance this. So staff would need a little bit more direction if, for example, a surcharge would even be if that's something that the board would like to consider, and if so, then staff can come back with some options on how to proceed with that.
Thank you. I've got Tina, you've got your hand up. Go ahead.
It's, I think, just universally, we could look back at, fees and charges and surcharges. I think that's been mentioned a couple of times. There might be some pros and cons, but we can explore that just holistically. Okay. So that would be one of the items we could look for to bring back.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I've got Director McMahon and then Director Toth.
Yeah, I'm opposed to raising the tipping fees at this time. I think it's definitely something we need to look at, but I don't like making these decisions on the fly when we're lacking a lot of data and we're in a very fluid situation where we don't know what's going to happen. So we've got a lot of people who are already pretty stressed about their taxes and about COVID and stuff, and then to whack them with more fees after they clean out their garage and sit in line for a very long time seems to me like not the best move for the benefit that we would gain from it. So I think this is something we need to come back to. I have a suspicion that Director Toth is right, that a lot of the seasonal spike is people who live here or at least live here seasonally. But we're about to find out. So I'm happy to revisit this one, in September, but I think we need to keep the hours that we've got, because there's nothing worse than making arrangements to borrow a truck and go drive up to the landfill and discover it's closed. That's how you end up dumping in the woods, because you got to get that truck back. Nobody wants your garbage. So I think we should continue forward as we are at this time, and then take another look at it, say September.
Okay, Tina, you still have your hand up. Did you want to address something else? Okay, Director Toth and then Director Kroll.
What she said. I couldn't put it any better myself. I think we don't have enough information here at this time. We're just seeing the start of the seasonal bump that may or may not actually appear. And I think to move on something that may not actually materialize would be a bad decision on our part. And I think September works. I was going to suggest July because we've got other stuff that we'll be looking at again in July, but maybe July is too soon. So I as well don't think we should be moving anything forward on the landfill until we know more about this bump that may or may not actually materialize this year.
Okay, Director Kroll and then Director Lee.
Thank you, Director Seegers. Not just this point, like I agree with what Donna was saying, the landfill, there's all sorts of issues there if fees are changed and hours are changed. All of the items in this report, though, beg a bigger question, and that's how this is communicated. If people are given background, people understand, and people become sympathetic and realize, oh, okay, if we don't pay for it now, we're going to pay for it in the future. So, they'll get behind and support it. I know Elizabeth with the town is going crazy because things are changing by the minute. And, she's, constantly updating the website and putting stuff out there. So, I think probably this goes to the bigger question is, our communications person and their capacity. But I think, everything will work if it's communicated properly.
Okay, Director Toth, you still have your hand up. Do you want to be added to the list again? Okay, I've got Director Lee and Director McMahon.
I could follow up on some of the questions, but that I had earlier, they weren't answered. But I really don't think it's constructive. The reason that I think they need to be explored and answered is the fact that our citizens will ask them, And unless we can say we considered them, we rejected them, or we accepted them, we're not going to be able to communicate effectively. And for us to make decisions here is not the right place. It's part of our communications and the fact that we've done our due diligence. So anyways, that's my thoughts. And I think that's what I heard several times already here, but in different formats and different ways. I don't know if we can wait till September or not. That's a long time, but you know, whatever the team thinks, I'm okay with.
Okay, so which items, if you just list them off, which ones weren't addressed in your list?
I can tell you which ones that I didn't think I liked the answers for.
Okay. Okay. Do you just want to list them off, and if we can address them now? I guess what I'm looking at is, at this point, we can come up with all kinds of items that might impact it a little bit. We need to look at what are we going to do? Is there anything we can do that could impact it a lot now? Or if not, what are some of the things we need them to come back in July to provide to us? Jim Rosenboom, go ahead.
Yeah, it would be option 2 for us is if there are items for the board that they would request us to consider, to assess, and bring back in context of the financial status of 1 or 2 months from now, let's say July, we can certainly do it. And so the only thing that I would need now is what are the options the board would like us to explore in terms of our service delivery levels or programs we continue or not continue with this year.
Okay, Director McMahon.
Right. Before my question, I was going to address Director Lee. We've just had one of the driest springs on record, and we have seasonal burning bans for a reason. So the last thing I would want at this point is to suggest that people burn their backyard waste rather than drop it off at the green dump. I had a lot of people contact me during COVID concerned about fires because they were stuck at home and their neighbors were burning and they were being smoked out and they were upset, distressed, ill, you know, asthma, whatever. So it's a very contentious thing. Regarding the landfill, I believe the landfill has cavities, and we have a report coming up on that at some point. So, you know, that's a good point for us to also look at the bigger picture again. When do we find out about our cavities?
Jim?
Report, I'm currently anticipating it will be June. At the earliest, early July at the latest.
Okay. Director Lee. Oh, you're still on mute.
I actually wasn't going to talk anymore, but
okay.
I had to answer that one. October, November, and December isn't dry, and that's not we're not at the end of the year. We're not talking about next week. We're talking about this year and next year. So I just wanted to make that point.
Okay, so I've heard a number of potential items that could maybe drop our costs a bit. What I did hear that could have a huge impact is actually closing the South Coast drop-off. Even temporarily? Is that something we could do temporarily? Like you said we have an RFP out right now. If we were to delay implementation of that until maybe August or September, would that make a difference? And then what would the impact be in the community?
We can assess that. We can provide some information on that.
When does the RFP close?
Shortly.
But that in our RFP, we still have that it's not necessarily awarded, correct?
Yeah, and we can still award it with a delayed implementation date.
Okay. Because you said something about that's $175,000.
Yeah, if we would, if it's between 175 a year, so if we would
Yeah.
delay it for a half year, it would significantly have an impact, and that's operation costs as well as the hauling to Shisho.
Right. Right. Okay. So personally, I'd like to see that looked at. So hold off on the awarding of that contract and bring that information back in July. I think I don't think we can wait beyond July. We're going to need to make some decisions in July around things like fees and charges. So that should be something that's included in July. That gives us, as some of the directors have said, we've had a lot of people at home. Things are going to start opening up now. They're going to start to get out and get back to work, etc. We may see a bit of a slowdown, and we may not. We don't know. The next couple of months will give us some more of that insight, so that in July we may need to look at fees and charges. I think it's too early to do that now, but that would be something. So those two are what I'd put forward. Director Lee, what I'd like you to look at in your list is, are any of those items materially impactful? So we're not looking at $2,000, $5,000. We're looking at quite a bit of money here for the landfill potentially. So $5,000 and $10,000 aren't gonna make the hit that we're gonna need to look at in this area. So, but I'd like you to look at your list if there are any in there that could potentially have larger impacts. Maybe the one about the Area A food waste sites. That was another one that GM mentioned, right? To delay implementation of those. That could potentially be a cost savings as well. Were there others that you mentioned as well, GM, that would have a significant impact financially?
Most of the others are in the range of between 5,000 and 10,000. So cumulative they would, but we also have to see, for example, on the Good Samaritan program. Now the backroad trash bash, there might be an opportunity to still have that event in a socially distanced way, and it's a good public engagement activity. So yes, there might be a little saving there, but having that program, having that event happening might also be beneficial in terms of the public engagement with the issues of illegal dumping and solid waste management.
Totally. As part of that, what I have heard is that the regional district is advising people that if they hire somebody for a drop-off, like to take their stuff to the landfill, that they request that they bring back the receipt for the cost, which can help with illegal dumping. Okay. All right, I have on my list, I had Director McMahon, Kroll, and Lee.
I support bringing a proposal on the green waste site. I have a lot of misgivings about it. A lot of what goes into that site is invasive plants. I have myself contributed many cubic meters of Himalayan blackberry to this pile. We need, if we were to discontinue the service for some period of time, we would need to lay out options for people. From a climate change strategy point of view, having everybody drive their lawn clippings around the coast does not strike me as a really positive thing to do. So we would have to give some thought to what the alternatives are. And if people can compost the material, but then I'm supposed to be fire smarting my backyard, so that great pile of clippings back there is probably something that I shouldn't have sitting next to the house. So because I'm sorry.
I know.
It's not as straightforward situation. But I'm happy to look at it because we should look at everything that we can do.
Okay, Director Kroll, then Director Lee.
Donna pretty well captured everything I was going to say. I've noticed when I've gone to the South Coast Green Waste, most people arrive with a garbage can or tarpaulin in the back of their car. You know, to drive from the South Coast to Sailor Soil with a small quantity like that is, I think it's environmentally counterproductive. And my big concern is that people are just going to look for more convenient spaces to dump it. And I think it's going to have a huge impact on the number of people who use the facility. Obviously, the costs associated with the facility are because of the number of people that do use it. I don't know whether there's not always an attendant there, so a small tipping fee obviously doesn't work. But I think it seriously needs to be looked at because I think it's going to have huge other implications. We also are faced with, the fire smarting people are ramping up their campaign for more people to become proactive in fire smarting their homes, which is only going to add to the green waste from the South Coast.
Okay, following up on that theme, I know we don't have a scale at the South Coast. What would the impact of a scale be at that site?
It would require an investment and an operator during the entire opening hours.
Right, and what would the impact be on revenue?
It would allow us to create revenues. For example, if there would minimum amount 90,000 for half a year. But
do we know what the cost is?
The cost of one staff member and the implementation of skills is about 200,000.
So we'd be actually we'd be losing money. Okay. Director Kroll, follow up, and then Director Lee.
Might there be an option? I know at the Burtnick gravel pit, they have a scale, and they also have a site there where they do take green waste and in some cases burn it, or in some cases chip it and take it to the mill for hog fuel. I believe there's also a scale at just off of in the industrial basin. So I'm just wondering if there might be an option there to create some sort of a thing with the operators of those sites that people could take their stuff, weigh it, and get it chipped.
Do you want to address that?
People currently have the ability to do so, and the RFP is still out there.
Okay. Director Lee?
I guess whatever proposal any of us put forward, we can debate the pros and cons here. We're not really the experts, and I can find 30 reasons not to do anything, and quite often one reason to do it outweighs everything. And so you need to actually do an analysis of all of the pros and cons and then make a decision. If we sit here and talk about these, we'll talk ourselves out of everything.
Yep.
So it's what do we want to do?
So on the table right now, we've got potentially delaying the South Coast drop-off and bringing back a look at fees and charges in July.
And I heard food waste program in Pender.
Right, food waste program in Pender. Anything else? All right. Would someone like to make a recommendation that staff come back with that information in July? And also delay the implementation, right? Or delay the awarding of the RFP. That's part of that, right?
There's actually two more hands up.
Okay. For questions? Director Toth, sorry.
It's okay. I had my hand up actually right after Director McMahon, and I was going to move exactly that recommendation. So I'm happy to move it right now to
Okay,
get
so
the conversation moving forward.
So that's moved. Is there a seconder? Seconded. Okay. Any other questions or comments? Director Lee, you have your hand up.
Yes, I just, is that all we're going to look at, is just those, or
Do you want to add others? Go ahead. Do you want to add others?
For
Do an
instance,
amendment.
well, it's a question to see if it's
Okay.
included in the motion.
Okay.
The stopping coupons and the Good Samaritan program was said that it would only save user fees, for instance. That's true. Pretty good to save user fees though, because you get to collect less the following year. So is that part of the user fees that we will be having a look at when we do this?
Would that be part of the fees and charges then? Is that what you're saying? No.
Yes.
No, not the only benefit. We can look at it and we can explain in the report what the impact would be for discontinuing this year's coupon program and the program. We can include it in the report.
Okay. Okay, so we'll add that to the recommendation. Tara? Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Do you want me to read what I have and you can amend as you will?
Sure.
That staff report to the July 2020 Infrastructure Services Committee meeting with an overview of cost-saving options such as delaying South Coast drop-off award, delaying implementation of Area A food waste, use of green waste sites, etc., and options in regards to fees, charges, and surcharges for regional solid waste services.
Yes, I think that covers that so far. And then Director Lee, you wanted to add in information on the Good Samaritan program and the which other one?
Programs.
Right. Coupon programs.
It sounded to me like it was included in the user fees review.
No, it isn't.
Well,
It's a program, but
Okay, you'd like those in there. We can add those in. Okay, what else did you have on your list?
Good enough.
That's it? Okay. Would you like to make that recommendation or the amendment to the motion on the floor to add the coupon program and the Good Samaritan program?
Sure.
Okay, is there a seconder for that? Seconded, okay. Then we'll go to Director Hills.
I am looking at the landfill closure contributions, which the 125,000 per year ends in 2021. So whether that could be split in half. So I wouldn't mind some numbers on that, whether we could, I'm not sure where we are on that liability. So.
GM?
Without, I can provide, we can provide further information on that, but given the, I would not recommend that because it would, if we divert, we need to get the money in, and I can provide the information, and CFO can do it as well. But doing so would require us to even only collect more next year, because we don't have that much time to build up our funds.
Hey, Director Hills, did you want that added in?
For completeness, I wouldn't mind
Okay.
it. Yeah, just.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Director Hills is amending, putting forward another amendment. So we're going to vote on these in reverse order then. So amending to add in information on the landfill closure funds. That was contribution. Contribution. Okay. Is there a seconder for that amendment? Okay, seconded. All right.
Just a point of order, Chair.
Yeah, I know we've got two amendments.
Yeah, but we have two amendments on the floor. One which has been moved and seconded and has not been voted on, and then to further amend that.
To add something else, yes.
Okay.
I know. It's not proper process. I get it. Tina, you had your hand up.
Yeah, and I think this sort of adds to Director Pratt's comment too.
Yep.
So just being mindful of the time, and I really empathize with, you know, the challenge the board has with all of these decisions, and I think that some of these suggestions are really good. I think that you know, from a direction perspective, really high level direction, you know, we could be sent back. We could bring back some of these more detailed options.
Mm-hmm.
It's more whether or not the board is even willing to contemplate service level reductions or fee increases. Like, are those things that you're willing to explore? Is the board willing to explore that level of service reductions, and even from an objective or a target, like even to provide options to mitigate 100% of the reductions or 50% of the reductions, because we've provided you with some potential forecasts there, right? So, you know, how could we achieve 50% reduction? And then to some other comments too. I mean, we can see what's feasible, what's not feasible, pros and cons, and those types of things. But we really just wanted to get a sense as to what the board felt comfortable with us to bring back. So as was opened, you know, this could be a soup to nuts report, or it could be just a little more directive, meaning, you know, this is on the table, this is not on the table. To get into like all the nitty gritty of the service, you know, I think it just highlights that these are all so complicated, and they all have different implications. So we'd be happy to provide some of the more detailed level stuff coming back, but we just wanted to know what types of things you guys, which was a no-go and what was a go.
So I think what I'm hearing from the board at this point is that they are willing to look at fees and charges, not now, because they want to see if what we've seen in the spring is an anomaly this year because of where we're at, and what the impact of that will be in the next couple of months as the economy starts opening up, businesses start opening up, and are willing to consider an impact of the South Coast green waste. The others are small, I get that, but I think those two is what I've been hearing from the board. CAO?
The other area that would probably be good to get some general direction on is if the board would like us to factor in or consider changes to staffing levels in these different that's within the scope as well.
Okay, that's not something that's been discussed. How do we deal with staffing levels inside of service delivery?
I think that's what would have to be contemplated. So if that's even something the board would like to contemplate, because I know that's definitely what other local governments have done through the pandemic, but our service reductions have been tied to facility closures. They haven't been further service level reductions per se.
Okay, so what you're saying is, do we want to potentially close the landfill for a further day or something? Because that would then result in staffing reductions.
Well, I think that would be the question. Is that even something you want us to contemplate?
Okay, so I know, okay, GM, go ahead. And then I'll tell you what I heard.
We can explore it, but we can explore it in the report, and I can indicate it there. But in 2013, it only results in us having to bring in more staff on the next day.
Right. So I think what I heard from the board around that conversation was they weren't willing to look at a reduction now in service, given the demand and the smaller delivery space we have. There's all kinds of other implications for that right now. When it comes back in July, if we're looking at fees and charges at that point, it may be that at that point, you know, and we've got more information about the landfill itself and how that's going to continue to operate given these cavities that have shown up. That might be a conversation at that point that we're willing to engage in. But I haven't heard from the board now, and everybody's got their hands up that they're willing to engage in that now. Okay, I had Director Pratt, and then everybody else. Okay.
Okay, I'm just going to put it out there that for anything going forward, for me, if we need to look at service reduction, if we need to look at staffing levels, I'm okay with that. We have services that we have to provide to the community. We have and we've got some pretty big projects coming forward. So if there's any place that we can cut to lessen the tax burden in other areas, then I think we need to look at it. We're in I'm going to use the word unprecedented, as much as I dislike it, but it is true. We need to look at everything, and our government here on the coast has gotten quite large within the regional district. Just because we have been adding services over the decades that we've been open. So I'm okay with taking a look at this now. I know it's something that we've brought up before in conversation about looking at service levels and staffing, and are we providing too much? Should we be looking at doing things differently? Given the pandemic situation, it has given us the opportunity to look at everything differently, look at how we're delivering, looking at how we're working, how we're moving forward on a number of levels. Let's use this opportunity to take a look and not leave a stone unturned.
Thank you. Okay, I've got Director Hiltz, Ties, Lee, and McMahon.
That was a missed raised hand.
Okay. Director Ties.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with Director Pratt. I think we should not leave any stone unturned. I think we need to look at all options, and I defer to the expertise of the staff to be able to come up with some ways for us to minimize the deficit that's happening, while at the same time keeping in mind that we do need to keep a certain service level alive.
All right, Director Lee.
I agree with Director Pratt and Director Tees. I wrote it down here that closer to the new service requirements and the associated infrastructure to meet them, and also consider the ability to, the COVID is fundamentally changing our society right now. And we don't know what those changes are and how long they're going to last before we come out the other end. And it's a serious situation, and we have to be serious about our business right now. And so I can't see taking anything off the table, and I can't see leaving any stone unturned. So that's what I was trying to say when I kept going back to these picky little things. Perhaps they can contribute to the end solution.
Okay, thank you. Director McMahon.
Yeah, transit is very straightforward. When we determine the schedule, we determine the staffing. And presumably if maintenance requirements go down, then, the maintenance staff will be adjusted accordingly. In terms of solid waste, clearly the landfill is very busy. So, and that's an essential service. So at this time, I would not want to start significantly reducing it until we see where we're at. And then as we come up on building inspection, I have some observations there too.
Okay. Just let me write a couple things down here. Okay, so right now on what we have in the recommendations, not all voted on at this point. We have looking at delaying implementation of the South Coast drop-off, looking at fees and charges, the coupons and Samaritans, and revisiting the amount of money, the contribution to the closure reserve. And then there's conversation now about staffing levels, which basically is service being provided. Does that cover off what the conversation is so far? All right, so we have a convoluted recommendation on the floor with we have a recommendation with 2 amendments at this point, which sounds like it'll probably be amended again. How do we do this?
We have 2 amendments, neither one which has actually been voted on.
That's right. Do we want to vote on Director Hiltz's recommendation that we have staff look at the amount of money that is being contributed to the closure fund for the landfill? All those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's vote that. Let's do that again. All those in favor of adding that on to the amendment? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so that's passed. And then we had an amendment to look at the coupon and Good Samaritan program and the impact of that. All those in favor of that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, that's passed. All right, so we have a recommendation on the floor that is looking at delaying the implementation of the South Coast drop-off and impacts, coming back with a look at fees and charges. I'm looking at the coupon program, the Good Samaritan program, and the contribution to the closure. Does anybody want to add something on there about staffing levels and service levels? Doesn't look like it. Okay. Is that something that we are going to be revisiting in July? Depending on the so I've heard 4 or 5 of you talk about nothing's off the table, but nobody's willing to put a recommendation forward. Director Lee was first, Director Ties.
I'm really bad at drafting motions, but I do want to move that. So let's keep all the options open.
Okay, Director Lee. Sorry, you're still muted.
If it's not implied in the existing motion, then we should add it.
Okay. Director Toth.
I'll be voting against this because I don't think it's going to have the intended effect. I think GM Rosenboom was quite clear that staffing reductions tend to have opposite effects on our service delivery when it comes to solid waste.
Yes, I agree. And what I'm hearing from the directors is we need to lay that out. We need to investigate it and bring it forward, because we don't know going forward if that will be something that will be the piece that will bring us back to a level where our funding covers off the service that we're providing. In all of these cases, we are looking at providing taxing for the service provision. If we're providing a service that is costing us more money and we have to go back to the population for more money on that, we need to just investigate it. It's not saying, by saying right now we want to investigate it, we're not saying we're doing it. We're saying we are willing to consider this. We're willing to look at it. We're willing to lay it out to the community. I'm sure we're going to hear from the community if we start talking about, cutting another day. If they know what the impacts are, they'll let us know if they're in favor of that or not. But if we don't actually consider it and put it on the table, we don't give the community the opportunity to come to us with their concerns. GM Rosenboom.
It could be maybe also included as a separate, maybe it can be a separate
recommendation. Okay.
Could be that staffing back an analysis to optimize service hours with demand.
Okay.
I will make that motion.
Okay, well, hang on. Let's vote on the one on the floor first.
Oh, okay.
So there's a motion on the floor. Is everybody clear what we're voting on? It's that whole long list of things. Okay. All those in favor? Thank you. All right. And then Director Pratt, you're going to make a motion?
I will make the motion that GM Rosenboom suggested about looking at the
Optimization
of staff hours. Is
and
that
service.
and service?
Service and demand. Service
Thank you.
hour. Landfill and transfer station service hour and demand.
What
Okay.
he said.
All right, Terry, you got that? Thank you. And it's seconded. Any further questions on that piece? All those in favor? Thank you. All right. That was long. Okay, building inspection. Director McMahon.
Yeah, I would like to come back to this one after we reopen the office, because it's my sense that a lot of the contractors and other people who are dealing with this sort of thing like to deal at the office level. And, you know, this is not something that's heavily influenced by COVID. The demand for building inspection will continue. So I'd kind of like to wait and see what happens on this one.
Okay. Anybody else want to move this one forward at this point? So revisit, leave it as is at this point and revisit in July. Okay, would you like to make a motion to that effect? Moved, seconded, all in favor? Thank you. Recreation. Director Ties.
Yeah, thank you. I'd like to investigate the option of mothballing a few of the facilities, and then so to not have them super ready for startup again, and then when we can actually start giving full-time services again, then to take those out of mothball. And seeing if there's any kind of reductions that can be found there, and which facilities I'll leave up to staff which facilities they would like to mothball. But I think there's some potential there.
Okay, Director McMahon.
That was in fact exactly what I was going to suggest, but I was going to specifically suggest the two older facilities, the Seashell Arena and the Gibson's Pool. That leaves one pool and one ice rink ready to go on the lower coast, and then Pender Harbor can figure out what to do with the pool. But that's a separate, I believe that's a separate service anyway. I would also like to see the numbers by facility so that we understand the impacts of how each facility operates. And I had a further question about the seasonality of user fees, because it's been my impression, I could be wrong, that ice fees are a big chunk of the user fees, and they of course only occur in winter. So do we have lower revenue in the summertime anyway?
Okay, so when you were talking about wanting numbers, what exactly did you mean? Oh, sorry, you just muted yourself. You were unmuted.
Sorry. I don't have a clear understanding of what it costs to run each one of the facilities, say, per month or whatever. So which ones are more expensive? Which ones derive more revenue? Like it's all lumped in as one service.
So you're looking at return on investment for each facility. Okay. That information is available.
Okay.
Yeah. I've seen it before, not recently, but I have seen it before. Okay. Director Ties.
Oh, actually, I was already unmuted.
Right. Sorry, and then Todd.
So I was. I'm just thinking, rather than recommending a specific facility, I do think that staff would probably be the best ones to answer that one, because a facility may it may be one of the larger facilities that could be mothballed, and it could create considerable more savings than having a small one that's older stay running. So I'm just hesitant to give a specific recommendation as to which ones we should mothball.
Okay, Director Toth?
Yeah, Director Ties and Director McMahon both have hit upon the same thing I was going to say. I was with Director McMahon. I was going to suggest the Seashell Arena and the Gibson's Pool. But I would be happy to move a recommendation at this time that staff consider mothballing one ice arena and one pool, and to come back with the cost implications of that at this time.
Right, is there a seconder for that recommendation? Yeah, okay. Number of them, okay. Director Hiltz, speaking to the recommendation.
Yeah, I'm just, this term mothball, I'm trying to understand, you know, and clear it up for staff what they're going to be looking at. I don't know what mothballing means, I guess is my question.
Okay, Director McMahon, and then Director Kroll.
Actually, I would have to agree with Director Hills. We'd better more clearly define what we mean. Having suggested two particular facilities, I'm going to actually backtrack. I think we need to look at the costs of operating all four facilities. And because what we might decide to do, unpopular as that would be to not run the ice rinks, because they are, I'm guessing, by far the most expensive facilities that we operate. So I think we should leave it open in terms, I think we should look at closing. How about long-term closure? How's that as a better term than mothballing? And we should look at the long-term closure of some of these facilities, but we need to understand the full implications of that before we can decide.
Okay, I've got Director Kroll and then Director Pratt.
It got covered.
Okay, Director Pratt.
I would just say, rather than using long-term closure, long-term temporary closure, or temporary closure of that. Long-term closure just might get interpreted far different by the community. I think temporary closure is probably a better term to use. And is that clear for staff? I mean, it's certainly better than mothball, but long-term closure has different implications.
Okay, I'm going to throw out another term and then I'll go to GM Hall. What about delaying reopening facilities? Oh, he's getting a thumbs up.
I was also just thinking of delayed opening, and we can certainly provide. It's sort of like it's not a lot different than when a mill or something goes down to minimums. There's still going to be a certain amount of staffing, a certain amount of costs incurred to have the facility not open to the public or providing services, and so we can show you what those numbers look like, and what that would achieve, and the cost of which, of course, is that those services aren't available to the public. So we can certainly run some numbers there.
Okay. So I have Director McMahon and Director Toth.
Delayed opening, great term. We also need to understand if we have a delayed opening, what are the costs to reopen?
Okay, and we'd also probably look at potential timelines as well, or not just timelines, but what would actually, kind of like our medical health officer thing, saying once we hit these conditions, then we would look at reopening. So what would be the conditions in the community or in our facilities that would have us look for reopening? What would be those kind of triggers you'd be looking for? Okay, Director Toth.
Yeah, I have concerns around delayed opening, because that implies that you're going to keep the equipment and the plants in a state of readiness as the equipment is now, and I think what we need to look at is actual like shutdown of our plants, of our equipment. If that means when we do go to reopen that we've got to pay costs to recharge refrigeration equipment, reinspect, things like that, that's what we need to look at, is that cost of keeping things in a state of readiness, which is what we have now. versus the reactivation costs of equipment that has been shut down for an extended period of time.
I'm going to turn to the GM Hall about that.
Every facility would be slightly different, but the director is right that there are certain restart costs. As long as there are pressure vessels, as long as there's ammonia stored in an ice plant, there are certain regulatory things that come with that. I think, based on the direction, that ways to minimize those costs by, for example, taking refrigerant offsite would be something that staff could look at as part of reporting back. And from staff's point of view, what I heard in whichever the language is, delayed opening or closure, is a willingness to consider service level reductions and a desire for more information on which to base those decisions. And whether that's closure of a facility or delayed reopening, sorry, whatever way you want to look at it, or whether it's changing hours of service, etc. The direction to consider service level reduction as part of mitigating the forecasted deficit is helpful to staff to take the next steps. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Director McMahon.
Or in the case of the Gibson's Rec Center, it might be looking at a partial reopening. There is no partial for the Gibson's Pool or the Seashell Arena, really.
Okay, GM.
Well, if I could add a comment, Chair, the restart protocols from the BC Recreation and Parks Association were just released yesterday. And I believe we continue to await sporting bodies' guidelines as well. And those will be important to us mapping out what we can do with our facilities and at what cost. So if there are measures that are required in order to bring facilities back into operation to achieve occupancies of X, which might only be 50% of normal, based on what was released yesterday and what we know is coming, we can build that into a report back that considers what deficit mitigation options exist around service level reduction.
Okay, Tara, I'm going to ask you to read back the recommendation that's on the floor and see if that's what the committee would like to see.
Thank you, Chair. Recommended the staff report to a future planning and community development committee meeting regarding the costs of operating the 4 recreation facilities, Gibson's Area Community Center, Seashell Aquatic Center, Sunshine Coast Arena, and Gibson's District Aquatic Facility, and that consideration be given to the cost implications of delayed openings of the Seashell or the Sunshine Coast Arena and the Gibson's District Aquatic Center, and timelines and costs required to restart and reopen these facilities.
Okay, does that reflect what you want to see moving forward? That's the recommendation that's on the floor. Director McMahon.
I think we agreed that we were going to look at all of them, not just the 2 for delayed. So can we, who's still got any brain cells left who can?
Director Toth.
I'd like to amend my recommendation to remove the Seashell Arena and the Gibson's Pool and replace with any and all facilities, I suppose.
Okay. Director Ties? You seconded the amendment?
Yes.
Okay. Do we need that read back to us again? Are you all clear? All right. All those in favor? Thank you. All right. We have one more in this report.
A point of order first.
Yes. Yes.
That was only on the amendment. That wasn't on the full motion.
Oh, sorry. Okay. So we have the amendment approved. We have a motion on the floor now to look at all facilities and have staff report back in July. All those in favor? Thank you.
Hang on. It actually
sorry.
was at the next PCD, which is in June, not July.
Okay. Does that work for you, GM Hall? Does that timing work?
Well, staff, this would be a team effort, so my colleagues may have additional comments. I understand the urgency, and we would strive for a June committee. Whether or not that would be planning, which gets published in a week, I can't commit to. I'm sorry.
Okay, Tara.
Thank you, Chair. I actually said a future Planning and Community Development Committee meeting. So
okay, good. Okay, so we're good. All right. So then let's vote on this amendment or this motion on the floor. All those in favor? Thank you. Okay, parks, and then we're going to talk about how we proceed because it's 12:30. Director Lee.
Was the Pender Pool next?
Oh, sorry, Pender. I skipped over that. Sorry. Yes, Pender Pool.
Okay. I'm not. I'd like to see the Pender Pool open because I believe that opening it would actually reduce the deficit at year end. Not because I really want to see the pool open. But I'm not sure if that's true, that opening it in a reduced fashion would actually mitigate the deficit.
Okay. Director or GM Hall, did you want to address that? Or do you know yet at this point, given the recommendations came out yesterday?
There would be a number of factors, including the ability to community confidence in attending recreation facilities. But I hear in the director's question or musing that that there's interest in understanding the relationship between the service level and operating costs in terms of the schedule. So if more information would be desired on that, then that would be something staff could be directed to bring back.
Director Lee?
Yes, what Ian said. More information.
Okay. Director Pratt, you had your hand up. Did you want to?
Well, I was just going to comment that the Pender Pool is a little bit of a different case because they typically have a longer closure during the summer anyway. So it may be a moot point because by the time the information all gets together, there might not be any public confidence, and we're going into the closure for the summer anyways. So it would be looking at September. So that's why I took my hand back down. I don't know if it might just be a moot point at this point.
So what you're saying is that June is probably not going to open anyway. We're going into July and August, so we're looking at September. Okay. So do you want that information coming forward potentially in July with the other reports?
Yes.
GM Hall?
I would note that we will report on variances for services as part of our normal financial reporting process. So the information will be produced anyway.
Right, but I think what Director Lee is looking at is similar to the information around the other facilities we're looking at. Which pieces do we want to move forward with and which ones not? Can staff give us a recommendation on that for opening up in September? What does that look like to minimize the potential deficit? Okay, Director Lee, is that what you're looking for?
Yes, that's exactly what I was looking for.
Okay, I don't know if that's a motion as such. Maybe GM Hall could figure out what I said.
I think if I combine my comments with your summary, Chair, I heard that as part of the Q2 variance, staff provide information, provide an updated forecast, including the potential implication of delayed opening for the services budget.
Probably delayed and or partial opening. Right? Because it may be that pieces of it, yes, you feel the community's got the confidence in it and financially makes sense to do it, where others maybe not. And I don't know if that's possible.
Well said, Chair.
Okay. Director Lee, are you making that motion?
Yeah, I'd like to make that motion.
Okay, is there a seconder for that recommendation? Seconded. Any further questions or comments? All those in favor? Thank you. Now we go to community parks. And Director McMahon.
I feel like we don't have enough information on community parks right now. I have a number of questions like, does 650 include playgrounds? I assume it does. If we were to reopen halls, do we have a lot more cleaning that we would be required to do in order to reopen them? So I don't know that enough information has come in from the province and the health authorities yet, for sure, to know which way we should jump on this one. So can we defer discussion of this for a period of time that makes some sense? Over to staff.
Okay, Tina?
Yeah, I think this is where in the word it does recognize that there's still some moving parts. And again, we have a report on today's agenda, which even just talks about making one particular service delivery decision. So we can report back as part of the July variance. Right now, Parks is not in a deficit position. So we can continue to do that and report back at Q2 and see if there's anything further we would advise to do.
Okay, do you need a recommendation for that at this point?
Would GM Hall like one? I mean, we're going to be doing it anyway.
Yeah.
So it's kind of already a sunk process. So as part of the Q2 variant. So I wouldn't see it required unless there's something specific you'd like us to look at.
Okay. Sherry?
I would just recommend a resolution just for public transparency so they understand how we've gone through each of these.
Okay. CAO McKinley first, and then we'll go to McMahon.
Yeah, I was just going to add, because Donna had brought up playgrounds, that right now the plan, working with Gibson's and Seashelt and with some discussion with the school board, it looks like the tape will be coming down off the playgrounds, and the playgrounds will be reopening to the public with appropriate signage as of June 1st is the plan right now, and that would be across the Sunshine Coast.
Okay, Director McMahon, and then Director Hiltz.
I'm happy to make the motion to refer this to the, was it July meeting? July meeting for further consideration.
All right, is there a seconder for that recommendation? Seconded? Okay, Director Hiltz to the motion.
Indirectly, it's the start date for the community halls has been, I've been told that staff are telling people that June 10th halls will be open.
GM Hall?
I don't believe that staff are telling the public that. Today, actually, staff are analyzing the restart information that was released yesterday to develop a plan that ensures we are meeting all requirements and best practice for to ensure that our patrons and our staff and our contractors who assist us with halls are safe.
So no reopening firm date yet?
I don't believe so, Director.
Okay, Director McMahon?
Yeah, I would also have the question around if we have the halls available, who's in charge of making sure that no more than 50 people gather? Or do we have any responsibility in that area, or is it, user beware? Just wondering. So for a future report.
I think that's all part of the plans that have to be put in place around the opening of the facility. I know that we're working on the same thing in Seashelt, and some of the things I've heard are we need people who are renting the facility to give us an indication of how they are going to ensure that they manage the numbers, manage, the social distancing, the physical distancing, all of those kinds of things, food protocols, everything else. So there's a lot of work to be done around that. So we have a recommendation on the floor that this come back basically to the July meeting. All those in favor? Thank you. All right, so we still have we have a number of recommendations in front of us, and we have another meeting starting in 45 minutes. How would you like to proceed? What are our options for proceeding? GM Rosenboom.
Thank you. In order to proceed with the Church Road Well process, I would recommend that at least a report, the next report on the agenda to be discussed prior to the board meeting this afternoon, because my recommendation is to move it to this afternoon so that we can start with the AP process by the end of next week.
Okay. Just trying to see if there are any others here. We have an in-camera portion as well, right? Okay, Tara?
In the in-camera, there are also 2 direct boards.
Yes. Okay, so let's, so could we do this? And Sherry, I'll look to you for this. Could we do Annex C, number 9 and 10? Well, actually, if we're going to do that, we might as well just whip through the rest of these really quickly, because we're not leaving many out. Because 9 and 10 are time sensitive as well. And do they need to go to the board? Director Pratt, I'm going to look to you for those 2.
Well, I'm just wondering, and our corporate officer can answer this, is whether or not it would be, if we could move our item number 4, 9, and 10 directly to board. And then we can discuss, 5 will take no time, 6 is fairly simple. 7, is 7 time sensitive as well? It is it not? I'd look to GM Hall.
I guess it depends on whether the committee has any concerns with the direction proposed, but I do note that there is a report back planned as part of regular variance reporting.
Okay. So my suggestion is moving 4, 9, and 10 directly to board, because we'd already kind of discussed 9 and 10 maybe going to board anyways at agenda setting or agenda review. Number 4, that way we can have a longer time for discussion. We've already had 3 readings on this bylaw, or yes. So, so that would be my suggestion.
Okay, and do we need a recommendation for that?
Yes, please.
Okay.
I'll move that.
Move the recommendation that number 4, 9, and 10 be moved to the board agenda this afternoon. All those in favor? Thank you. All right, let's move on to item number 5. Director's constituency and travel expenses. Annex D. Just one thing I noted in here was that the conclusion, some of the numbers are incorrect in there. Tina?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So staff are just working through those to reconcile them. So we'll provide a subsequent update to them just to match those. So.
Okay. Any questions from any of the directors? Okay, so item number 6, Union of BC Municipalities Resolution. And, sorry, I have to get right to the page. So when we talked about this at the agenda review, I'm not happy with the final clause in here. How can we make that stronger? Director McMahon.
Well, one suggestion is rather than reaffirm support for, we could say that UBCM urged the province to take action on amending the recycling regulation.
Would you like to make that recommendation?
Sure.
I'll second that. Any other comments or questions? All those in favor? Thank you. And then Director McMahon, you were looking to bring forward another recommendation?
Yeah, I think perhaps we can bring it to a future meeting, but I would like to see whether we could put together a resolution arising from the April 9th staff report on the BCTS operating plan. In particular, that highlighted the need for Flinrod, Modi, and other ministries to continue to consider cumulative effects of land use decisions, especially as regards drinking water protection and geotechnical hazards. So if staff could maybe take a look at that and come back to us at a future meeting, because, you know, I'm not sure what previous motions may have been made on this topic.
Okay, would you like to make that recommendation?
Yep.
And Director Ties is seconding it? Yep, second. Any further comments or questions on that recommendation? All those in favor? Thank you. Annex F, Catherine Lake Campground Service. And does somebody want to address this, or are we just going to, has everybody read it? Any questions? No questions. How would you like to proceed with the recommendations on page 31? Director Lee?
Recommendations be accepted as submitted.
All right, is there a seconder for that? Director Hiltz?
Yeah, I was just I was going through the projected deficit. And so I was unclear, this is zero camping for the rest of the year. That's the understanding of this?
GM Hall?
Thank you for the question, Chair. We have Park Superintendent Kevin Clarkson in the meeting now, and okay. He can speak to the parameters that went into calculating the projected deficit.
All right, Mr. Clarkson.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the question. So the scenarios that were forecasted were based on 3 generalities. One would be status quo, maintain day use only at Catherine Lake Park and Campground. Scenario 2 would be half capacity beginning approximately June 15th in accordance with provincial guidelines. And scenario 3 would be full opening approximately June 15th for the operational season. The calculations are based on the assumption of averaged revenue since the 2017 operating season. They're also based on the assumption of max occupancy throughout the entire operational season.
Director Hiltz, follow up?
I'm still struggling a little bit. So starting in June 1st, you're going for 100% camping capacity?
Thank you for the question. The numbers are based on revenues that would be associated with 100% capacity. Scenario 2, keeping in mind that 100% capacity only means 50% of the campsites taken up.
So I guess the question, what scenario are we looking at in the recommendation then? I'm just trying to sort through the.
Thanks for the question. I feel that this aligns with the provincial recreation guidelines that GM Hall has previously mentioned were released yesterday. The guidelines so far that BC Parks is following is they're projecting an early June opening at most of their facilities based on half capacity and BC resident-owned camping, only camping. Should that be the preferred direction that the board gives, we'll look at aligning our strategy with what's been taken by the province at least.
And I'm still, so the recommendation is for scenario number 3.
The recommendation is that park staff follow provincial guidelines and adjust. For the time being, we would be operating at half capacity residents only and adjust as necessary following province's lead.
And what I read in this and the report is that this is what we're anticipating based on the information we have now, but that they'll come back in Q2 and Q3 and they may need to revisit this. At this point, they're projecting a deficit of 18,660 based on the assumptions they've made, and that may change. GM Hall, I saw you. Correct. Yeah, I saw you were unmuted there for a bit.
You read my mind with your clarification, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, Director Hiltz, did you want to follow up on that? Okay, Director Ties and Director McMahon.
Yeah, just quickly, I was a bit blown away at $1,000 a year in bank fees. Just wondering why we have such high bank fees.
That's a Tina question.
Sure, it's because we have point of sale machines up there. And so those are essentially what we incur based on the usage for the rental of the machine as well as processing fees.
Okay, Director McMahon.
I truly hate to ask another question at this point. I'm in favor, by the way, of reopening ASAP following provincial guidelines. Have we looked at raising our fees?
GM Hall or Mr. Clarkson?
Well, I'll say that we have not specifically recently looked at our fees, but as I mentioned on the budget project status report, as part of park management planning, service levels within parks and the fees charged for those service levels are being looked at right now.
Okay. So we have a recommendation. Sorry, go ahead.
So just to follow up, the answer is yes, we are looking at maybe raising the fees for this campground this year.
Well, staff, I would say no. I would say that we're looking at the baseline service level in the park and what you get for what you pay to camp there, and how that might compare with others on the coast, and what sustainability for the asset looks like. And while it's true that that may lead to a conclusion that a change in fees is appropriate, staff would consider that a policy decision, and could imagine ourselves back speaking with you about a decision about adjusting service level or adjusting fees so that the two are aligned. Thank you.
Okay. First of all, Tara, we made a motion. Did we have a seconder for that? No seconder? Okay, so there's a recommendation that we adopt. Somebody moved these recommendations as on this page, but nobody seconded. Okay, it is seconded. Okay, Director Toth, and then Director Hills.
Just a super quick question. It's not immediately apparent to me in the report. Separate from the day use of Catherine Lake, Does the campground itself actually break even, or is it still a money loser? Do we
Who
know?
would like to address that one? Mr. Clarkson, do you know? Or Tina, do you know?
I'd like to respectfully defer to Tina.
Okay. Tina?
I think it's kind of articulated in the report. It's not break even, but our trends have gone down. It used to be a money generator, but we've seen a slow decline. So just on page 34 of the agenda, you'll see the revenue over the last few years. So 2019, we saw quite a drop compared to 2017. So those are things we can look at as well. So it is being subsidized overall.
Okay, Director Hiltz? No, you're good? Okay. All right, so we have a recommendation on the floor. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor? Thank you. One more, communication. Library Director Gibson's and District Public Library, and this is pretty much for information, and we've received this. I believe Seashell Library is in the same place. They're looking at opening as well. Director Toth, you've been on those conversations?
I've actually missed the last couple library board meetings because I've had other things going on. Director Pratt may have more
Director
information.
Pratt, okay.
Unfortunately, I missed last Saturday's meeting as well, and I have not yet seen the notes yet. I can tell you, though, from the last update from the library director, they're very cautious about moving forward. There's a trying to find the comfort level with staff, but they're definitely communicating with the province and, or pardon me, with other provincial library associations as well. They might be slightly behind where Gibson's is at, though.
All right, I'd like to entertain a motion to move in camera in accordance with section 91K of the community charter. Someone like to move that? Moved and seconded. All in favor? Thank you. And then do we have anybody in our gallery?
Thank you, Chair. I can report that there has been no one in the gallery for this meeting.
All right. So we want to move in camera. Do we need a break, or do we just want to get through these and then take a break before our next meeting? Thank you. So we are back in the open portion of the Corporate and Administrative Services Committee meeting. And I'd like to have a motion to adjourn the meeting. Moved and seconded. All in favor? Thank you. And I'll mention it here that we are going to be coming back at 10 to 2 to start the board meeting. It will not start at 1:30. It will start at 10 to 2. And do we have anybody in the gallery?
We do not at this time.
All right. Thank you. And we'll see you all at 10 to 2.